When Lena Whitmore caught her fiance's tongue down her sister's throat at Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala, she made a choice that would shatter her world and rebuild it in blood and wine. One kiss, one dangerous man, one empire forged from betrayal. This is the story of how a broken woman became untouchable, and the mobster who taught her that vengeance tastes better served with vintage Bordeaux. If you're ready for a story where love doesn't save you, it arms you, then stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this tale travels. The Vandermeer Foundation Gala glittered like a dragon's hoard, all crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes catching light like captured stars. Lena Whitmore had dressed for triumph tonight, wearing a midnight blue gown that cost 3 months of careful saving, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon that took her stylist 2 hours to perfect. She'd chosen diamonds for her ears because Marcus had once told her they made her eyes sparkle. Marcus, her fiancé, the man who'd proposed beneath the Brooklyn Bridge 6 months ago while tourists applauded and she'd cried happy tears into his Tom Ford jacket. The same Marcus who currently had his hand up her sister's dress behind the baccarat crystal display. Lena stood frozen in the gallery archway, a glass of cristal turning warm in her trembling hand. The scene before her played out in horrifying slow motion. Victoria's head thrown back in pleasure, her strawberry blonde hair spilling over Marcus's shoulder as he kissed her neck with the same hungry urgency he'd once reserved for Lena. Victoria, her own sister, wearing the emerald earrings their mother had left them both, the ones they'd promised to share for special occasions. Apparently fucking your sister's fiancé qualified as special. "Oh my God," someone whispered behind Lena. "Is that Victoria Whitmore and Marcus Chen?" Another voice confirmed, sharp with scandal-hungry delight. "And isn't Lena supposed to be here tonight? I thought I saw her earlier." The whispers spread like wildfire through the gallery. Heads turned, phones emerged from designer clutches. Lena felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes, discovering her humiliation in real time. The city's elite, gallery owners, wine distributors, museum curators, society columnists, all witnessing the moment her carefully constructed life revealed itself as a beautiful lie. Marcus's head snapped up, his face draining of color as he saw her. "Lena, fuck, it isn't what it looks like?" Lena's voice came out eerily calm, though her entire body had started shaking. "You're right. It looks like you're fingering my sister behind a $100,000 crystal installation. I'm sure the reality is so much better." Victoria had the decency to look ashamed for approximately 3 seconds before her expression hardened into something defiant. "Maybe if you'd been woman enough to keep him satisfied, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." The gallery gasped in collective shock. Someone's champagne flute shattered on the marble floor. Lena's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of these vultures who would feast on her pain for weeks, dissecting every moment over brunch at Balthazar and cocktails at the Campbell. She'd worked too hard to build her reputation in New York's competitive wine world, fought too many battles to be taken seriously as a curator rather than just another pretty face trying to play sommelier. And now Victoria, her own flesh and blood, had stripped it all away with one vicious sentence. "You know what?" Lena heard herself say, her voice rising with a hysteria she couldn't control. "You deserve each other. You're both cheap imitations of something real." She turned on her heel, desperate to escape before the dam broke entirely, but champagne and shock had made her clumsy. She stumbled backward, her ankle twisting in her Louboutins, and she would have hit the floor except strong hands caught her waist, steadying her with effortless strength. "Careful," a deep voice murmured against her ear, rich and dark as aged whiskey. "These floors are unforgiving." Lena spun in the stranger's grip and found herself staring at a face that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons than her previous shock. The man holding her was perhaps 40, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. His eyes were such a dark brown they appeared black in the gallery's dramatic lighting, and they studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. He wore a Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than her monthly rent, perfectly tailored to broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. Everything about him screamed money and danger in equal measure, from his platinum Patek Philippe watch to the way other guests subtly moved out of his path, creating an invisible circle of space around him. "Thank you," Lena managed, her hand still pressed against his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath the fine fabric, incongruously calm while her own pulse hammered like a trapped bird. "I'm humiliated," he supplied, one corner of his mouth lifting in what might have been sympathy or amusement. "Betrayed, angry enough to do something reckless. You don't know me." "I know what I see." His hands remained on her waist, warm and possessive in a way that should have alarmed her but somehow didn't. A woman who just watched her world end, surrounded by people who will turn her pain into entertainment. Lena glanced around and realized he was right. The whispers had intensified, phones now openly recording. She could already imagine the headlines. Wine curator Lena Whitmore dumped in spectacular fashion at Vandermeer Gala. Her professional reputation, everything she'd built over 5 years of brutal networking and expertise cultivation, would become a punchline by morning. Something in her chest cracked wider, flooding her system with a reckless fury that drowned out common sense. She looked back at the stranger, really looked at him, and saw the way the crowd watched him with fear poorly disguised as respect. Saw the two men in dark suits positioned at strategic points around the gallery, clearly his security. Saw the deference in the way even the Vandermeer Foundation's board members kept their distance. This man was dangerous. This man was powerful. This man could give her exactly the kind of revenge that would obliterate Marcus's smug superiority. "Kiss me," Lena said. His dark eyebrows rose fractionally. "Excuse me? You said I'm angry enough to do something reckless. You're right." She grabbed his lapels, pulling herself closer, dizzy with champagne and heartbreak and a desperate need to hurt Marcus the way he'd hurt her. "So kiss me. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Make it spectacular. Make it filthy. Make him regret every choice that led to this moment." For several heartbeats, the stranger didn't move. His eyes searched her face with an unreadable expression, as if weighing consequences she couldn't begin to imagine. The rational part of Lena's brain screamed that this was insane. She was propositioning a complete stranger at a public event, probably destroying what remained of her reputation. But the champagne and fury had merged into something combustible, and she was so tired of being good, being careful, being the woman who played by all the rules, while people like Victoria and Marcus shredded them without consequence. "You don't know what you're asking," the man said quietly, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated through her bones. "Or who you're asking it from." "I don't care. I want him to see. I want everyone to see." Lena's fingers tightened on his jacket. "Please, just this once, let me be someone who doesn't give a fuck about consequences." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of dark amusement mixed with something that might have been admiration. "Your funeral," he murmured. Then he slid one hand into her carefully styled hair, tilted her head back with firm authority, and kissed her like he was staking a claim. Lena had been kissed before, chaste pecks from college boyfriends, Marcus's practice technique that always felt slightly performative. This was nothing like those experiences. This was a consumption. The stranger's mouth moved over hers with devastating expertise, his tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that made her knees buckle. He tasted like expensive scotch and something darker, more dangerous. His free hand splayed possessively across the small of her back, pulling her flush against his body until she could feel every hard plane of muscle beneath the tuxedo. Heat exploded through her system, shocking in its intensity, and she heard herself make a small sound of surprise that he swallowed like victory. The gallery erupted around them. Cameras flashed. Someone dropped their champagne. Lena heard Marcus shout her name. "Lena, what the fuck?" But the stranger's kiss consumed her entire world. She forgot about the crowd, forgot about her humiliation, forgot everything except the way this dangerous man held her like she belonged to him. When he finally pulled back, his eyes had gone molten with heat. "Feel better?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. "Not remotely," Lena admitted breathlessly. "Do it again." His laugh was low and appreciative. "Greedy." "Desperate," she corrected, and then his mouth was on hers again, fiercer this time, one hand still tangled in her ruined updo, while the other gripped her hip hard enough to bruise. Lena kissed him back with everything she had. All her rage and pain and shattered dreams poured into the press of lips and clash of tongues. She vaguely registered Marcus storming toward them, shouting something about respect and boundaries, but then two large men in dark suits materialized to block his path. "Mr. Morello doesn't like to be interrupted," one of them said flatly. Morello. The name detonated in Lena's champagne-soaked brain like a depth charge. Dante Morello. She'd heard that name whispered at industry events, always in tones of fearful respect. Real estate developer, the society pages claimed. But the rumors suggested something far darker: organized crime, money laundering, connections that reached into every corner of New York's power structure. The kind of man whose charity donations were accepted without question because no one dared refuse him. The kind of man whose kiss she was currently drowning in while Manhattan's elite watched in scandalized fascination. Jesus Christ, Lena. Marcus had gone pale, actually backing away from Morello's security. "Do you have any idea who that is? What he is?" Lena broke the kiss just long enough to meet her ex-fiancé's eyes. "Someone who knows how to make a woman feel wanted," she said clearly. "Something you apparently forgot how to do." Victoria had appeared at Marcus's side, her expression twisted with jealousy and shock. "You're making a spectacle of yourself. This is pathetic, Lena." "No," Dante Morello said, his voice cutting through the gallery with quiet authority that made everyone freeze. He kept one arm wrapped around Lena's waist, holding her against his side like a prize he'd won. "What's pathetic is a man who cheats on a woman like this with her own sister. What's pathetic is a sister who betrays blood for a mediocre fuck." His gaze swept over Marcus and Victoria with contempt that could strip paint. "You wanted a spectacle? Congratulations. But the show's over. Get out of my sight before I have you thrown out." "Your sight?" Marcus sputtered. "This isn't your event." "Actually," a new voice interrupted smoothly, "Mr. Morello is our platinum sponsor this year." James Vandermeer himself had appeared, the foundation's elderly chairman, looking deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps it would be best if everyone took a moment to compose themselves. What he meant was clear. Marcus and Victoria needed to leave before Dante Morello decided to make their humiliation even worse. The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see if Marcus would be stupid enough to push back against a man whose reputation promised violence as easily as most people promised lunch dates. Marcus was apparently not that stupid. He grabbed Victoria's arm and pulled her toward the exit, though not before shooting Lena a look of pure venom. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "When you wake up tomorrow and realize you've destroyed your entire reputation for a cheap revenge fuck with a criminal." "My reputation?" Lena laughed, high and brittle. "You destroyed my reputation the moment you decided my sister was a better option than your fiancé. At least I'm going out with style." She watched them disappear into the crowd, Marcus's face scarlet with rage, Victoria stumbling in her heels. The whispers intensified immediately, a tidal wave of gossip that would crash through every social circle in the city by midnight. Lena's phone was probably already exploding with texts and calls from colleagues, friends, her mother. By tomorrow, she'd be infamous for all the wrong reasons. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt eerily numb, like she'd stepped outside her own body and was watching someone else's life implode. "You're trembling," Dante observed, his hand still warm on her waist. "Shock," Lena said faintly. "Or champagne. Or the dawning realization that I just kissed a man whose Wikipedia page probably uses the word alleged 40 times. 47, last I checked." His mouth quirked with dark amusement. "Should I apologize for enjoying it? Should I apologize for using you as a weapon? I've been used for worse purposes." He studied her face with that same intense focus, as if reading a language only he could understand. "Though most women don't proposition me quite so directly. Most women probably have better survival instincts." Lena tried to step back, to put some distance between herself and the human grenade she'd just pulled the pin on, but his arm tightened fractionally around her waist. "Stay," he said quietly. "At least until your legs stop shaking. The last thing you need is to collapse in front of these vultures and give them more ammunition." He was right, though Lena hated admitting it. Her entire body had started shaking in earnest now, adrenaline crash combining with champagne and emotional devastation into something that threatened to put her on the floor. The crowd was still watching, still whispering, phones still recording every moment of her spectacular downfall. "I need air," she managed. "I need to get out of here before I—" "Come with me." It wasn't a request. Dante guided her through the crowd with the same quiet authority he'd used to dismiss Marcus. People parting before him like he carried his own gravity field. His security flanked them at a discreet distance, ensuring no one approached with questions or cameras. They moved through the gallery, past gasping socialites and gleeful gossips, until they reached a private corridor marked with a discreet staff-only sign. "We can't," Lena started, but Dante simply pushed through the door, leading her into a quiet hallway lit with soft sconces. The sounds of the gala faded to a muffled murmur. Blessed silence wrapped around them like a blanket, and Lena sagged against the wall, her legs finally giving out. Dante caught her before she could slide to the floor, lowering her with surprising gentleness until she sat with her back against expensive wallpaper, her ridiculous designer gown pooling around her like spilled ink. He crouched before her, one hand still steadying her shoulder, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Breathe," he instructed. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're hyperventilating." Lena tried to obey, but her chest felt locked tight, panic clawing at her throat. Oh God, I just destroyed everything. My career, my reputation, A sob broke free before she could stop it. 5 years. I spent 5 years building credibility in this industry, and I kissed a stranger. I kissed you, in front of everyone who matters. And? She stared at him through tears. And what? And do you regret it? Dante's thumb brushed her cheekbone, wiping away moisture with unexpected tenderness. Or do you regret getting caught carrying what they think? The question hit like a slap. Lena opened her mouth to insist of course she regretted it. This was insane. She'd committed professional suicide for a moment of petty revenge, but the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was more complicated than simple regret. The truth was that kissing Dante Morello had felt like the first honest thing she'd done in years. Everything with Marcus had been performance, playing the perfect fiancé, the grateful girlfriend, the woman who didn't notice how often he checked his phone or came home late smelling like unfamiliar perfume. She'd performed the role so well she'd almost convinced herself it was real. "I don't know," she whispered finally. "I don't know what I feel right now, except..." Another sob. "Except broken. Everything's broken." Dante was quiet for a moment, studying her with those unreadable dark eyes. Then he shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket and draped it around her shoulders, enveloping her in warmth and the scent of expensive cologne, something with notes of cedar and leather and smoke. "You're not broken," he said. "You're angry. There's a difference. I used you." Lena clutched the jacket tighter, shame finally breaking through the numbness. "I didn't even ask your name. I saw an opportunity to hurt Marcus, and I took it. Yes." He settled beside her against the wall, his shoulder brushing hers. "Do you know what I saw when you asked me to kiss you?" She shook her head mutely. A woman who'd been performing for an audience her entire life, suddenly deciding she was done with the script. His voice dropped lower, intimate in the quiet corridor. "That takes courage, not stupidity, though the execution could use work." Despite everything, Lena felt a laugh bubble up, broken and slightly hysterical, but genuine. "Execution, that's one way to describe it. I've executed worse plans with worse people." He paused, though usually not in formal wear. "Are you always this calm during disasters?" "I'm usually the one causing them." The corner of his mouth lifted. "This is refreshing, being someone else's crisis for once." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the gala muffled and distant. Lena's breathing had finally slowed to something approaching normal, though her hand still trembled when she reached up to touch her ruined hair. Pins had scattered everywhere during Dante's thorough kissing, leaving her chignon half collapsed in a way that probably looked perfectly wrecked. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow, when everyone's posting pictures and videos, when my boss sees me making out with..." She caught herself. "With you. When my mother calls screaming about family embarrassment. When Marcus starts telling people I'm unstable. Let me ask you something." Dante shifted to face her more directly, his expression serious. "This reputation you're afraid of losing, is it real or is it something you've been playing at?" The question stung. I've earned everything I have. 5 years of 80-hour weeks, sommelier certifications, building relationships with vineyard owners across 3 continents. That's not what I asked. His gaze pinned her in place. I asked if the reputation is real. The Lena Whitmore everyone thinks they know, the one who'd marry a man like Marcus Chen, who'd tolerate a sister like Victoria. Is that who you actually are? Or is that a story you've been telling because it seems safer than the truth? Lena felt something crack open in her chest, spilling years of carefully maintained pretense. The truth was, she'd been playing a role for so long, she'd almost forgotten there was a real person underneath. The dutiful daughter who didn't complain when her mother showed obvious favoritism toward Victoria. The understanding fiancé who made excuses for Marcus's increasing distance. The professional who swallowed casual sexism from clients and smiled because making a scene would damage her career. She'd been performing competence and compliance for an audience that would never actually respect her, just use her until something better came along, like Victoria had, like Marcus had. I don't know who I am, she admitted, the words barely audible. I thought I did, but tonight I looked at my life and realized none of it was real. Not my engagement, not my family, maybe not even my career if it's built on playing nice with people who'd sell me out for a better story. Then maybe it's time to find out. Dante stood, offering her his hand, the real Lena Whitmore, not the performance. She stared at his extended hand like it might bite. You're offering to help me have an existential crisis? I'm offering you a choice. His voice was steady, certain. You can go back out there, apologize to everyone, try to salvage the reputation of a woman who doesn't exist. Spend the next year rebuilding trust with people who never actually trusted you, marrying yourself to a career that makes you perform someone else's idea of acceptable. He paused. Or you can walk away from all of it. Burn it down. Start over as someone who doesn't ask permission to take what she wants. That's easy for you to say. Lena gestured helplessly at him. You're Dante Morello. You can burn things down without consequences. There are always consequences. Something dark flickered in his expression. The difference is whether you choose them or let them happen to you. Lena looked at his outstretched hand, then back toward the gallery where her old life was currently being dissected by gossips and camera phones. She thought about calling Marcus tomorrow, begging him to tell people it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been drunk and heartbroken and not herself. Thought about damage control with her boss, her colleagues, everyone who would question her judgment and professionalism. Thought about spending years trying to prove she was still the reliable, respectable Lena they'd always known. The idea made her want to vomit. If I take your hand, she said slowly, what happens next? Dante's smile was dark and promising. Whatever you want, within reason. Define reason. Nothing that ends with you in prison. I have standards. Despite everything, despite the catastrophic implosion of her entire life, Lena laughed. It felt dangerous and liberating, like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like borrowed armor. Okay, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Okay, show me what burning it all down looks like. His fingers tightened around hers. You're sure? Once we walk out of here together, there's no going back to the performance. Everyone will have opinions about who you are and what you're doing. Most of them will be wrong, but they'll be loud. Let them talk. Lena squared her shoulders, feeling something fierce and unfamiliar uncoiling in her chest. I'm tired of playing the good girl for people who wouldn't cross the street to help me. If they're going to gossip anyway, I might as well give them something worth talking about. That's the spirit. Dante led her toward a different exit, away from the main gallery. Come on, I know a place where you can catch your breath without an audience. They emerged into a private elevator, all polished brass and mirrored walls. Lena caught sight of her reflection and winced. Mascara smudged, hair half destroyed, lipstick thoroughly kissed off. She looked like the aftermath of a disaster, which was accurate enough. Where are we going? She asked as the elevator descended. Somewhere you can think without 300 people recording your breakdown. Dante leaned against the brass railing, studying her with that same intense focus. Unless you'd prefer to go home alone and spiral into regret. Home is Marcus's apartment. We were supposed to move to a bigger place next month. The words tasted bitter. I gave up my lease because he said we should save money for the wedding. So you're homeless, reputation destroyed, and publicly humiliated. Dante's expression didn't change. Is that everything, or should I add jobless to the list? Not yet, but probably by Monday when my boss sees the videos? Lena laughed weakly. I'm a wine curator for Hampton Estates. We cater to extremely conservative old money clients who value discretion and decorum. Making out with a known... She caught herself again. With you. That's grounds for termination in their world. Then their world is too small for someone like you. The elevator opened onto a private parking garage where a black Mercedes waited, driver already standing at attention. Get in. Lena hesitated. This was insane. Getting into a car with a man she'd kissed exactly twice, whose reputation suggested he solved problems with methods that would horrify her former self. But her former self had also trusted Marcus, had believed in family loyalty, had played by every rule, and still ended up with nothing. She got in the car. The leather interior smelled like expensive luxury and danger. Dante slid in beside her, close enough that she could feel his body heat, and gave the driver an address in Queens. Then he pressed a button that raised a privacy screen, cocooning them in intimate darkness broken only by passing streetlights. You're not going to murder me, right? Lena asked, attempting lightness despite the very real flutter of fear in her stomach. Because that would really cap off a terrible night. If I wanted you dead, there are easier methods than a scenic car ride. Dante pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. I'm texting my head of security to make sure no one bothers you tonight. The paparazzi will have gotten wind of the scene by now. They'll be camped outside Marcus's apartment within the hour. Paparazzi? Lena's voice cracked. Oh God, I didn't even think. This is going to be everywhere, isn't it? Not just society pages, actual tabloids. Probably. He finished his text and pocketed the phone. Beautiful woman publicly dumps cheating fiancé by kissing dangerous criminal at charity gala. That's page 1 material. Especially if they get a good shot of the look on Marcus's face when my security blocked him. Lena covered her face with her hands. This is a nightmare. This is an actual nightmare. Or an opportunity. Dante gently pulled her hands away from her face, his touch surprisingly tender for a man with his reputation. Think about it. By tomorrow, everyone in New York will know your name, know your face. Know that Marcus Chen is an idiot who cheated on you with your sister. Know that you're the woman who kissed Dante Morello in front of 300 witnesses and walked away laughing. I didn't walk away laughing. I walked away having a panic attack in a hallway. They don't know that. His thumb traced her knuckles. They'll see what you show them. And right now you're showing them a woman who doesn't back down, doesn't apologize, doesn't shrink. I'm showing them a woman who's lost her mind. Same thing, depending on your perspective. The car turned onto a quieter street, brownstones replacing skyscrapers. How long were you with Marcus? 3 years, engaged for 6 months. And how many of those years were you actually happy? The question landed like a punch. Lena opened her mouth to defend the relationship, because she had been happy, hadn't she? There were good times, romantic dinners, weekend trips to the Hamptons, but the memories felt hollow now, performance footage from a life that had never quite fit right. I thought I was happy, she said finally. I thought I was building something real. A partnership, a future, all the things you're supposed to want. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I was just convenient, the perfect +1 who didn't ask too many questions about where he went when he said he was working late. Men like Marcus collect women like trophies. They want someone who makes them look good without actually challenging them. Dante's voice carried an edge of contempt. You were too much for him. Too smart, too ambitious, too real. So he went looking for someone safer. Victoria's not safer, she's just more desperate for approval. Lena felt a fresh wave of anger crash through her grief. She's been competing with me since we were kids, always trying to prove she was prettier, more charming, more worthy of attention. I thought we'd grown past that. I thought as adults People don't grow past their damage, they just get better at hiding it. The car pulled up in front of a renovated brownstone with a private entrance. Come on, you need food and water before you make any more life-altering decisions. The building was beautiful in an understated way. No doorman, no obvious security, just elegant architecture and carefully maintained landscaping. Dante led her through an unmarked door and up a private staircase to what was clearly his personal residence. The apartment sprawled across the entire top floor, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Minimalist furniture in dark leather and polished wood, abstract art on the walls, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a chef's wet dream. This is... Lena stopped, taking it in. This is not what I expected. What did you expect? Plastic furniture and blood-stained carpets? Dante shrugged out of his tuxedo vest, draping it over a chair. Sit. I'll make coffee. You cook? The question came out more surprised than she intended. I heat water and push buttons on an espresso machine. Don't give me too much credit. He moved through the kitchen with efficient familiarity, pulling down cups and measuring grounds. Take off those ridiculous shoes before you break an ankle. Lena obeyed, slipping out of her Louboutins with a groan of relief. Her feet ached from hours of standing, and the adrenaline crash was making every muscle feel like lead. She curled up on his leather sofa, still wrapped in his jacket, because the alternative was facing the destroyed dress underneath. Why are you helping me? She asked as he worked. You don't know me. I literally used you as a prop for petty revenge less than an hour ago. Call it curiosity. Dante glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. Most people who know who I am won't even make eye contact, let alone proposition me for public displays of affection. You either have tremendous courage or terrible judgment. Probably both. Lena watched him move, fascinated despite herself by the contradiction he represented. Dangerous criminal making espresso with the precision of a master barista. Does this happen often? Women throwing themselves at you for revenge schemes? You'd be surprised how often people want to use me for something. Usually it's political favors or business deals. He brought over 2 cups of coffee, the scent rich and comforting. Rarely does someone offer quite so directly. I appreciated the honesty. Lena accepted the cup, wrapping her hands around the warmth. The first sip exploded across her tongue, perfectly balanced, complex, probably made from beans that cost more per pound than her monthly grocery budget. This is incredible. I have standards about some things. He settled beside her, close but not crowding. Tell me about your work, the wine curation. Why? Because you're sitting in my apartment wearing my jacket and drinking my coffee. Seems like we should at least attempt a normal conversation. Fair enough. Lena took another sip, organizing her thoughts. I worked probably, for Hampton Estates. We're one of the premier wine distributors on the East Coast, specializing in connecting private collectors with rare vintages and emerging vineyards. I've spent the last 5 years building relationships with winemakers from Napa to Bordeaux, learning how to identify quality beyond just price tags and critical ratings. She paused. It's competitive and exhausting, and most of my clients are insufferable snobs who think my opinion matters less because I'm young and female. But when I find the perfect wine for the right client, when I can connect someone with a bottle that transforms their entire understanding of what wine can be, that's magic. Dante listened with the same intense focus he'd shown earlier, like her words mattered in a way most people's conversations didn't. What got you into it? My father. The memory brought a bittersweet smile. He died when I was 15. Heart attack, sudden and brutal. But before that, he collected wine. Nothing expensive or pretentious, just bottles he loved from places he'd traveled. He'd let me taste them sometimes, tiny sips, and tell me the stories behind each one. The Chianti from our trip to Tuscany, the Riesling from my mother's favorite restaurant. Wine was how he held on to memories. She stared into her coffee. After he died, I started learning everything I could, became obsessed with understanding what made certain wines special, how terroir and technique and time created something extraordinary from simple grapes. It felt like keeping him alive somehow. And your mother? She supported this? Lena laughed without humor. My mother wanted me to marry someone rich and stable. She tolerated my career as long as I was also playing the game, networking with the right people, dating appropriate men, maintaining appearances. She adored Marcus because he checked all her boxes. Harvard MBA, family money, connections in the right circles. Her voice hardened. I wonder what she'll think of Victoria now. if blood loyalty will trump social climbing. My guess? She'll blame you for making a scene and forcing Victoria into an awkward position. Dante's cynicism felt earned somehow, like he'd seen this pattern play out before. People who value appearances over substance always find a way to make the victims responsible for their own humiliation. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I'm speaking from observation. He stood, moving to the windows overlooking the city. I've watched families destroy themselves over smaller betrayals than yours. Watched people sacrifice their children, their integrity, their humanity, all to maintain an image of respectability that was never real to begin with. Lena joined him at the window, the Manhattan skyline glittering like scattered diamonds. Is that what you did? Sacrificed respectability for... She gestured vaguely at the luxury apartment, the obvious wealth, the security team that followed him everywhere. For this? I sacrificed the illusion of respectability. Dante's reflection in the glass looked carved from shadows and sharp edges. My family expected me to take over a struggling construction business, work 80-hour weeks for diminishing returns, bow and scrape to union bosses and corrupt building inspectors. I decided there were better ways to make money, more honest ways, ironically. Honest? That's an interesting word choice for someone whose Wikipedia page is allegedly full of alleged criminal activity. His laugh was dark and genuine. You looked me up? I recognized your name. Hard to curate wine for New York's elite without hearing certain names whispered in certain tones. Lena met his eyes in the reflection. Dante Morello, real estate developer with rumored connections to organized crime, suspected of money laundering, racketeering, and various other activities that are never quite proven, but always suspected. Suspected isn't convicted. His voice carried no shame, just matter-of-fact acknowledgement. I've never been charged with anything because there's nothing to charge me with. I develop properties, invest in businesses, make profitable deals. If people want to assume that involves illegal activity just because I don't come from old money or Ivy League pedigree, that's their prejudice showing. And if they're right? He turned to face her directly, eliminating the barrier of reflection. Then you're standing in the apartment of a very dangerous man, wearing his jacket, drinking his coffee, after kissing him in front of everyone who matters in your world. If I'm everything they say I am, you should be terrified right now. Are you? Lena searched her feelings honestly. She should be afraid, common sense demanded it, but standing here with Dante, seeing the way he looked at her like she was worth his full attention, feeling more grounded than she had in months despite the catastrophic implosion of her entire life. Fear wasn't what she felt. No, she admitted. I'm not afraid of you, which probably means my judgment really is terrible. Or it means you recognize the difference between dangerous and harmful. He reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. I've hurt people. I won't pretend otherwise. But I've never hurt someone who didn't come at me first, who didn't try to take what wasn't theirs, who didn't mistake civility for weakness. And what about people who use you as props for petty revenge? They usually end up in my apartment drinking expensive coffee while I decide whether they're worth the complication. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the touch sending electricity down her spine. Verdict's still out on you. Lena should step back, create distance. Remember that this man was fundamentally dangerous no matter how gentle his touch. Instead, she found herself leaning into his hand, chasing the warmth and certainty he offered. What happens now? You've gotten me away from the paparazzi, given me coffee and perspective. Do I just go back to my life? Try to salvage what I can? You could. Dante's hand dropped away, leaving her skin cold. Or you could stay here tonight, get actual rest instead of spiraling into panic, and figure out your next move when you're not running on adrenaline and champagne. Stay here, Lena tested the words, in your apartment, overnight. I have 3 guest rooms. You can lock the door if it makes you feel safer. He moved back toward the kitchen, giving her space to breathe. Or I can call you a car to anywhere else you want to go. But those paparazzi aren't going away, and Marcus's apartment is the first place they'll wait for you. He was right, though accepting his hospitality felt like crossing another line she couldn't uncross. Then again, she'd already crossed so many lines tonight that one more hardly mattered. And the alternative, facing the circus alone, fielding calls from her mother and boss and former friends, all while trying to figure out where she'd even sleep, felt impossible. Guest room, Lena said finally, with a lock. And tomorrow I figure out what comes next. Fair enough? Dante pulled out his phone again, typing rapidly. I'm having someone collect clothes and essentials from Marcus's place. They'll leave everything outside your door within the hour. Size? What? You can't just break into his apartment. I'm not breaking in. I'm having your belongings collected since you live there and have every right to your possessions. His expression was mild. Unless you'd prefer to go fetch them yourself? I'm sure the paparazzi and Marcus would love that confrontation. Lena imagined showing up at Marcus's apartment, facing his anger and Victoria's smugness, while photographers documented every moment. Size 6, she said quietly, and my laptop is in the study, silver MacBook. Toiletries in the master bathroom. Most of my clothes are still in boxes because we were supposed to move. My people will handle it. He finished his message and pocketed the phone. Come on, I'll show you the guest room. He led her down a hallway lined with more abstract art. Expensive originals, Lena suspected, though she didn't recognize the artists. The guest room was larger than her old studio apartment, with a king-sized bed, attached bathroom, and windows overlooking a small private terrace. Everything was decorated in the same minimalist aesthetic as the rest of the apartment. Clean lines, neutral colors, furniture that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Towels in the bathroom, toiletries in the cabinet, Dante said from the doorway. Locks here. He demonstrated the deadbolt. Kitchen's stocked if you get hungry. Make yourself at home. Why are you doing this? Lena asked again, needing to understand. You don't owe me anything. I basically ambushed you. Maybe I like being ambushed by beautiful women with nothing left to lose. His smile was sharp and enigmatic. Or maybe I see something in you that reminds me of myself at a crossroads. Angry enough to burn everything down, smart enough to build something better from the ashes. Either way, you're here now. Try to get some sleep. He left before she could respond, closing the door with a quiet click. Lena stood alone in the expensive guest room, wearing a borrowed tuxedo jacket over a destroyed evening gown, and felt the full weight of the night crash over her like a wave. She'd kissed a stranger, made a spectacle of herself in front of everyone who mattered in her professional world, likely destroyed her career and what remained of her family relationships, accepted hospitality from a man whose reputation suggested he solved problems with violence and intimidation. And somehow, standing here in Dante Morello's guest room with the Manhattan skyline glittering outside her window, Lena felt more alive than she had in 3 years of playing the perfect fiancé. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She'd somehow kept hold of it through the entire disaster. 47 missed calls, 112 text messages, 3 voicemails from her mother, each increasingly hysterical. Messages from colleagues asking if she was okay, from friends wanting gossip, from Marcus demanding she call him immediately to explain herself. She turned the phone off without reading any of them. Tomorrow, she'd deal with consequences. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to rebuild a life from the wreckage of tonight's choices. Tomorrow, she'd decide if Dante Morello was a dangerous mistake or an unexpected opportunity. Tonight, she was just going to survive. Lena showered in the guest bathroom, using expensive products that smelled like bergamot and cedar. She found a robe hanging on the back of the door, men's size, ridiculously oversized on her frame, but soft as silk. When she emerged, she found a bag outside her door containing clothes, toiletries, her laptop, and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Everything retrieved without incident. Mr. Chen sends his regards and requests you return his key. She laughed at that, dark, brittle laughter that threatened to tip into tears. Marcus's regards. As if they were business associates concluding a transaction rather than a couple whose engagement had exploded in spectacular fashion. She supposed that's all they'd ever really been, a transaction disguised as romance, with both of them performing roles they thought the other wanted. Well, no more performances. Lena changed into her own pajamas, grateful for familiar cotton against her skin, and crawled into the guest bed. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, impossibly soft, and the mattress felt like sleeping on a cloud. Through the windows, the city glittered with possibility and threat in equal measure. Somewhere out there, people were already sharing videos of her kissing Dante Morello. already writing headlines and social media posts about the spectacular downfall of Lena Whitmore, already deciding who she was based on 30 seconds of footage and years of assumptions about what a woman like her should want, should do, should be. Let them talk, she thought, exhaustion finally pulling her under. Let them make their judgments and spread their gossip and feel superior in their stable little lives. They didn't know her. They never had. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to introduce them to someone new, someone who didn't ask permission, someone who took what she wanted, someone who kissed dangerous men at charity galas and walked away laughing. Lena Whitmore fell asleep in a stranger's guest room, wrapped in borrowed luxury, and dreamed of burning her old life to the ground. Morning arrived with the cruelty of unfiltered sunlight and the persistent buzz of her phone, which Lena had forgotten to silence before finally passing out near dawn. She reached for it with one eye still closed, her body protesting every movement after a night of champagne, emotional devastation, and exactly 2 hours of actual sleep. The screen showed 63 new notifications, and her stomach turned over as memory crashed back in waves. The gala, Marcus and Victoria, Dante Morello's mouth on hers while 300 people watched. "Oh God," she whispered to the empty room, pulling a pillow over her face. "Oh God, that actually happened." A soft knock at the door made her jump. "You alive in there?" Dante's voice carried through the wood, amused and far too alert for whatever ungodly hour this was. Lena checked the time, 9:17. She'd slept through her alarm, not that it mattered, since she almost certainly didn't have a job to go to anymore. "Technically," she called back, her voice rough from crying and sleep deprivation, "though I'm accepting arguments to the contrary. Coffee's ready when you are. No rush." His footsteps retreated down the hallway, and Lena forced herself upright despite her body's protests. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like something from a horror film, mascara smudged into raccoon circles, hair matted on one side, pillow creases marking her cheek. The face of a woman whose life had imploded in spectacular fashion approximately 12 hours ago. She showered again, trying to wash away the lingering sense of unreality, then dressed in jeans and a simple black sweater from the bag of clothes that had mysteriously appeared. Someone, presumably Dante's people, had been thorough. They'd packed her favorite toiletries, comfortable clothes, even her running shoes and the battered leather journal she kept beside her bed. The efficiency was both impressive and mildly terrifying. When she finally emerged, following the scent of coffee and something baking, she found Dante in the kitchen wearing dark jeans and a black Henley that made him look simultaneously more human and more dangerous than he had in formal wear. He was reading something on his phone while an espresso machine hissed and gurgled, sunlight streaming through the massive windows to illuminate the whole domestic scene in ways that made Lena's brain short-circuit slightly. "You bake?" she asked, because apparently her coping mechanism for emotional catastrophe was stating the obvious. "I reheat things my housekeeper leaves." He gestured to a basket of croissants on the counter. "But I appreciate the faith in my domestic abilities." "How'd you sleep?" "Like someone who drank too much champagne and destroyed her entire life in one evening." Lena accepted the cup of coffee he offered, the ceramic warm against her palms. "So, about as well as expected. Could be worse. You could have woken up with regrets." "Who says I didn't?" Dante's dark eyes studied her with that same unsettling intensity from last night, like he could read truths she hadn't admitted to herself. "Do you? Regret it?" Lena took a long sip of coffee, buying time to examine her actual feelings beneath the panic and hangover. The honest answer was complicated. She regretted the pain, the sharp shock of betrayal when she'd seen Marcus with Victoria, the humiliation of 300 witnesses to her heartbreak. She regretted that her mother would be furious, that her professional reputation was probably destroyed, that every relationship she'd carefully cultivated over 5 years was now tainted by scandal. But the kiss itself, the look on Marcus's face when Dante's security had blocked him, the feeling of doing something purely for herself without calculating the social cost, that part she couldn't quite regret, even knowing the price. "I regret getting caught in a situation where kissing a stranger seemed like my best option," she said finally. "But I don't regret choosing the option I chose." Honest answer. He pulled out his own phone, tapping the screen a few times before sliding it across the counter to her. "You should probably see this before you check your own messages." Lena's stomach dropped as she looked at the screen. Page 6 had already posted multiple articles, each with progressively more salacious headlines. Wine curator Lena Whitmore's public meltdown, kisses alleged mob boss after fiancé caught cheating. The main photo showed her and Dante locked in that first kiss, her hands fisted in his lapels, his hand tangled in her hair. The image was stunningly intimate. You could see the desperation in her body language, the possessive certainty in his. A smaller photo captured Marcus's face in the background, pale with shock and fury. "They're calling it a meltdown," Lena said flatly, scrolling through the article. "Of course they are. Woman catches fiancé cheating and responds with anything other than quiet dignity. Must be unstable." "Keep reading." She did, and her eyebrows climbed higher with each paragraph. Because while the headline focused on her supposed breakdown, the actual content of the articles was far more interested in Marcus and Victoria. Multiple sources, anonymous but clearly from inside the gala, had provided details about how long the affair had been going on. 6 months, according to one source. Nearly a year, claimed another. Someone had even dug up photos of Marcus and Victoria together at events Lena hadn't attended, their body language suggesting intimacy that went far beyond appropriate sibling-in-law interaction. "They're destroying him," she breathed, reading through comment sections that tore Marcus apart with vicious creativity. "People are actually on my side." "You're the wronged woman who responded with style instead of tears. That's a narrative people love." Dante reclaimed his phone. Plus, Marcus made the mistake of trying to play victim. He gave a statement to the press around midnight claiming you were unstable and had been struggling with jealousy issues for months. "He what?" Lena's coffee cup hit the counter harder than intended. "That lying piece of... I know. Which is why my publicist released security footage from the gala showing exactly when you discovered the affair, including audio of Victoria's charming comment about you not being woman enough." His expression remained neutral, but something cold glittered in his dark eyes. "Funny how his jealousy narrative falls apart when there's video evidence of your sister calling you inadequate while your fiancé has his hand up her dress." Lena stared at him. "You have a publicist? And security footage?" "I'm a careful man who documents everything. And yes, I employ someone whose job is managing my public image. Turns out that's useful when beautiful women kiss me at charity events." He pulled out a croissant, tearing it in half with precise movements. "Vanessa's been fielding calls since 6 this morning. Every outlet in the city wants the story. Your side, my side, whether we're dating, how long we've known each other, if the kiss meant anything or was just strategic revenge." "What are you telling them?" "Nothing. That's what I pay Vanessa for, to say no comment in increasingly creative ways." He paused, studying her face. "But that's a temporary solution. Eventually you'll need to decide what story you want to tell. Whether you want to play the heartbroken victim, the empowered woman taking control, the cautionary tale, or something else entirely." Lena grabbed her own croissant, needing something to do with her hands. The pastry was perfectly flaky, buttery richness dissolving on her tongue in a way that felt obscene given the circumstances. "What would you do if you were me?" "I'd stop caring what story other people tell and start living the one I want." Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was suggesting a restaurant rather than a complete life philosophy. "But I'm not you. I don't have a career that depends on maintaining relationships with people who value reputation over reality." "Had a career," Lena corrected bitterly. "Past tense, I'm sure Hampton Estates has already drafted my termination letter." As if summoned by her words, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen showed her boss's name, Richard Hampton III, managing director and grandson of the company's founder. A man who'd once told her that women in wine needed to be twice as professional and half as visible to be taken seriously. "That's him," she said, her stomach knotting with dread. "That's my boss." "You going to answer?" Lena looked at the phone, then at Dante, then back at the phone. Every professional instinct screamed at her to answer, to grovel, to salvage whatever scraps of her career might survive. But something else, something newer and angrier and tired of apologizing, made her reach over and decline the call. "No," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "He can leave a message like everyone else." Dante's smile was approving and slightly dangerous. Look at you. Learning already. Learning what? How to be unemployed. But there was no real heat in her words. Declining Richard's call had felt oddly liberating, like refusing to perform a role she'd never actually wanted. Learning that people who demand your deference don't deserve it. He finished his coffee and moved to rinse the cup, movements economical and precise. Richard Hampton's going to fire you whether you grovel or not. The only question is whether you let him make you beg first. The casual certainty in his voice made Lena's throat tight. You sound very sure about that. I've met men like Richard. They care about image above everything else, their own comfort, their employees' well-being, basic human decency. You became a liability the moment those photos hit social media. Nothing you say or do will change that calculation. So I'm just supposed to accept it? 5 years of work, all my industry connections, everything I built, just gone? No. Dante turned to face her fully, his expression serious. You're supposed to stop measuring your worth by whether people like Richard decide to employ you. You're a wine expert with years of experience and relationships with vineyard owners across 3 continents. That knowledge doesn't disappear because your boss is too much of a coward to stand by his employees when they become inconvenient. Lena wanted to argue, to defend Richard or Hampton Estates or the career she'd poured herself into. But her phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from Richard himself. We need to discuss your conduct at last night's event and its impact on the company's reputation. Please call me immediately to schedule a meeting. Not, are you okay? Not, I saw what happened with your fiancé. Just a corporate demand to explain herself, couched in language that made her personal devastation into a business inconvenience. He didn't even ask if I was all right, she said quietly, staring at the message. My engagement ended in the most public, humiliating way possible, and his first concern is the company's reputation. Because you're an employee, not a person, not to him. Dante came around the counter to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell cedar and leather from his cologne. You want my advice? Don't give him the satisfaction of firing you. Quit first. Take control of the narrative before he tries to spin this as mutually agreeing to part ways or some other corporate bullshit. Quit. Lena tested the word, feeling its weight. Just walk away from everything I've built. Walk away from a job that never valued you properly. There's a difference. His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and grounding. But it's your choice. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life. Her phone buzzed again. Another call from Richard. Then a text from a colleague. OMG Lena, are you okay? Richard is furious, saying you've damaged relationships with major clients. Call me. Lena looked at the messages, at the concern that was really just gossip hunger disguised as care, at the professional life she'd built on a foundation of playing nice and performing gratitude and never making waves. She thought about going into Richard's office, enduring his disappointment and subtle condescension while he explained how her personal drama reflected poorly on Hampton Estates' values. Thought about trying to rebuild trust with clients who would always remember her as the woman who had a public meltdown at a charity gala. Or she could just not. She could walk away. Start over. Build something that didn't require constant performance and deference to men who saw her as decoration rather than expertise. I need to make a call, she said abruptly, snatching up her phone. Can I use your terrace? I need privacy for this. Dante gestured toward the windows. Doors unlocked. Take your time. Lena stepped outside into crisp morning air that bit at her skin through the sweater. The terrace was small but beautifully maintained, with sleek furniture and planters full of herbs that someone clearly tended with care. She paced the length of it twice, rehearsing words in her head before finally calling Richard back. He answered on the first ring. Lena, finally. We need to discuss. I resign, she cut him off, her heart hammering. Effective immediately. You can consider this my 2 weeks' notice, but I won't be coming into the office. Silence. Then, excuse me? I said, I resign. I'll send a formal letter by end of business today. The words came easier now, gathering momentum. You can tell clients whatever you need to tell them about my departure. I'm sure you'll find some diplomatic way to explain it. Lena, let's not be hasty. Richard's tone shifted to that condescending reasonableness he used when he thought employees were being emotional. I understand you're going through a difficult personal situation, but this has nothing to do with my personal situation. She was surprised by how calm she sounded, how certain. This has to do with me realizing I don't want to work for someone whose first response to my public humiliation was concern about the company's image rather than my well-being. I've given Hampton Estates 5 years of 80-hour weeks and exceptional work. In return, you've underpaid me, undermined my expertise in front of clients, and are now upset that my private life became public fodder. I'm done performing gratitude for the privilege of making you money. If this is about compensation, we can discuss it's not about money. It's about respect, which you've never actually given me. Lena felt something fierce and liberating unfurl in her chest. Good luck replacing me, Richard. I hope whoever you hire is willing to accept your casual sexism and corporate cowardice in exchange for a mediocre salary and zero job security. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing hard, waiting for panic or regret to crash over her. But what came instead was a strange, giddy relief, like she'd been holding her breath for 5 years and could finally exhale. That sounded definitive, Dante said from the doorway, his expression unreadable. I just quit my job. Lena laughed, high and slightly unhinged. I just quit my job without a backup plan or savings or any idea what I'm going to do next. That's insane. That's completely insane. Or it's the sanest thing you've done in years. He stepped onto the terrace, bringing her abandoned coffee. How do you feel? Terrified. Exhilarated. Like I might vomit. She accepted the coffee, taking a long drink to steady herself. Like I just jumped off a cliff without checking if there's water below. There's always water. Question is whether you learn to swim before you hit bottom. Dante leaned against the railing, his dark eyes studying her with that same intense focus. What do you want to do, really want, not what you think you should want? Lena opened her mouth to give some safe, responsible answer about finding another position at a different wine distributor, rebuilding her reputation through careful networking and professional behavior. But the words that came out were different, truer, dangerous in their honesty. I want to burn Marcus's life down the way he burned mine, she admitted. I want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything you've built because someone you trusted decided you weren't worth their loyalty. I want Victoria to realize she didn't win anything worth having. I want everyone who's gossiping about my meltdown to see me build something so successful, so undeniable, that they have to respect me whether they like me or not. Dante's smile was sharp and approving. Now that's an actual goal, specific, measurable, and satisfyingly vindictive. We can work with that. We. You think I kissed you in front of 300 people just to abandon you the next day? His tone was amused, but something serious lurked beneath it. I meant what I said last night. You're at a crossroads. You can try to resurrect your old life or build something new. If you choose the latter, I can help. Why? Lena needed to understand his angle, his motivation for helping a woman he'd known for less than 24 hours. What's in this for you? Entertainment. Investment opportunity. A chance to piss off people I don't like who will definitely disapprove of me helping you. He shrugged. Does it matter? You need resources and expertise you don't currently have. I have both in excess. Seems like a mutually beneficial arrangement. Arrangements require terms. What would you want in return? For now, just the satisfaction of watching you succeed spectacularly enough to make Marcus Chen regret being born. Dante's expression remained neutral, but his eyes glittered with something dark and promising. Later, if your success makes me money, we can discuss appropriate compensation. But I'm not asking you to sell your soul, Lena. I'm offering you a partnership. It should have sounded too good to be true. It probably was too good to be true. Men like Dante Morello didn't offer partnerships out of pure altruism. There was always an angle, always a price that would come due eventually. But Lena was standing on a terrace in Queens, unemployed and publicly humiliated, with no safety net and no backup plan. She could play it safe, try to rebuild what she'd lost, spend years proving to people like Richard Hampton that she was respectable and trustworthy despite last night's scandal. Or she could take the hand Dante was offering and see where it led. What kind of partnership? She asked carefully. The kind where I provide capital and connections while you provide expertise and vision. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. I've been looking to invest in luxury goods and experiences. Wine seems like a natural fit. High margins, loyal customer base, opportunities for vertical integration from vineyard to distribution. You know that world inside and out. I know how to build businesses and navigate complicated logistics. Together, we could create something that makes Hampton Estates look like a college student's hobby project. Lena's brain started spinning possibilities despite her better judgment. A wine business of her own, curating collections, building direct relationships with vineyard owners, creating experiences instead of just facilitating transactions. No Richard breathing down her neck, no clients who saw her as decoration rather than expertise, no ceiling on what she could build. That would take significant capital, she said slowly. Warehouse space, import licenses, insurance, establishing credit with vineyard owners who've never heard of me outside Hampton Estates. We're talking hundreds of thousands before we see any return. I'm aware. I've been researching the industry for the past 3 hours while you slept. Dante showed her his phone screen, spreadsheets, market analysis, notes on import regulations and distribution channels. I had my people pull together preliminary data. The market's there if we position correctly. High-end clients who want expertise and exclusivity, not just another wine shop charging premium prices for mediocre selection. You did all this since last night? Lena scanned the documents, impressed despite herself by the thoroughness. Why? You didn't even know if I'd be interested. Call it a calculated gamble. I'm good at reading people, and I read you as someone who'd rather build something new than beg for scraps from her old life. He pocketed the phone. Was I wrong? No, Lena admitted. You weren't wrong. But starting a business with someone I've known for 12 hours seems insane, reckless, exactly the kind of decision that got you into this mess. His smile was knowing. All true. But you already blew up your life last night. Might as well make it count for something. Her phone buzzed again. Her mother this time, probably calling to scream about family embarrassment and how could Lena humiliate them like this. She declined the call without hesitation, something that would have been unthinkable yesterday, but felt perfectly natural now. I need to think about this, she said. Not because I'm not interested, but because I don't make business decisions on impulse, even after quitting my job on impulse. Fair enough, Dante gestured back toward the apartment. Think about it over breakfast. Then I'll take you to see a property I've been considering for the warehouse space. No commitment, just looking. They went back inside and Lena found herself actually eating despite the chaos churning through her system. The croissants were perfect, the coffee better, and Dante proved surprisingly easy to talk to when he wasn't being mysterious or dangerous. He asked intelligent questions about wine curation, what made certain vintages valuable, how relationships with vineyard owners worked, what separated exceptional distributors from mediocre ones. He listened like her answers mattered, taking notes on his phone, occasionally asking for clarification in ways that showed he was actually processing the information rather than just performing interest. It reminded Lena uncomfortably of the early days with Marcus, when he'd seemed fascinated by her work and supportive of her ambitions. Before the relationship had settled into comfortable routine, where her career became background noise to his own professional advancement, before Victoria. Stop, Dante said abruptly. Lena blinked. Stop what? Comparing me to him. I can see it in your face. You're running calculations about whether I'm performing interest or actually interested, whether this partnership offer is real or just manipulation. His dark eyes pinned her in place. I'm not Marcus. I don't need to pretend to care about your expertise to sleep with you or control you or whatever you're worried about. I'm offering a business partnership because I think it'll make money and piss off the right people. The rest is just details. The rest is whether I can trust you, Lena shot back. You're asking me to build my future on your word when I don't actually know you. For all I know, this is some elaborate scheme to what? Humiliate me further? Steal my industry contacts? I don't even know what your angle could be, which somehow makes it worse. My angle is profit. He said it flatly, without apology. I'm a businessman, Lena. Everything I do is calculated to either make money or consolidate power, usually both. Helping you build a successful wine business does both. It diversifies my portfolio and gives me leverage in luxury goods markets I haven't penetrated yet. The fact that I also find you intriguing and enjoy your company is peripheral to the business case. The brutal honesty should have been off-putting. Instead, Lena found it strangely reassuring. At least he wasn't pretending this was charity or friendship or anything other than what it was. "Okay," she said slowly. "Okay. Show me this warehouse property. Let me see your actual business plan, not just preliminary research. If it makes sense, if I think we could actually build something viable, then maybe we talk seriously about partnership terms. That's all I'm asking." Dante stood, offering his hand. "Come on. Property's in Red Hook, about 20 minutes from here." The drive gave Lena time to check her phone properly, scrolling through the wreckage of her personal and professional life. Her mother had called 6 times and left 3 increasingly hysterical voicemails about family reputation and how could Lena throw away a good man like Marcus over one mistake. Victoria had texted a single message: "You always have to make everything about you. Hope your tantrum was worth it." Various colleagues had reached out with messages that ranged from genuine concern to thinly veiled gossip fishing. Her best friend from college, Maya, had sent a simple, "Whatever you need, I'm here. No judgment." That one made Lena's eyes sting with tears she refused to let fall. And Marcus. Marcus had sent a long, rambling text around 3 in the morning that swung between anger and self-pity, blaming Lena for humiliating him, accusing her of overreacting, claiming Victoria had seduced him and he'd been weak, but he still loved Lena and they could work through this if she'd just be reasonable. "He thinks I'm going to take him back," Lena said, showing Dante the message as they pulled into an industrial area near the waterfront. "He actually thinks I overreacted, and if I calm down, we can work through this." Dante read the message with an expression of distaste. Men like Marcus never believe their actions have real consequences. In his mind, you'll eventually forgive him because the alternative, actually being held accountable, is inconceivable. He parked in front of a sprawling brick building with high windows and a for lease sign. "Want me to explain consequences to him? I can be very persuasive." Tempting, but no. "I don't need you to fight my battles." Lena climbed out of the car, studying the building with professional interest. "Is this the warehouse?" Former textile factory, converted for modern use but maintaining historical character. Dante led her to a side entrance where someone was already waiting, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense pantsuit. "Lena, this is Patricia Moore, commercial real estate specialist." "Patricia, Lena Whitmore, potential tenant and wine expert." Patricia's handshake was firm and assessing. "Mr. Morello mentioned you might be interested in the space for wine storage and distribution. Let me show you around." The interior was perfect. High ceilings with original exposed beams, climate control already installed, loading docks for shipment receiving, office space that could be converted to a tasting room. Patricia walked them through the specifications while Lena's mind raced with possibilities. Where she'd position inventory, how to organize by region and vintage, what kind of client experiences she could create in this kind of space. "It's too much," she said finally, even as her heart ached with want. "I don't need this much square footage, not starting out. The lease costs alone would be manageable if you're willing to sublet part of the space," Patricia interrupted smoothly. "The building has several potential tenants interested in smaller units. We could partition the warehouse, give you primary access to the climate-controlled sections while leasing the rest for light industrial use." Lena looked at Dante suspiciously. "You arranged this already, before even asking if I was interested." "I arranged the viewing and discussed options with Patricia. You're the one making decisions about whether to pursue it." He wandered over to the windows, hands in his pockets. "But yes, I may have been optimistic about your interest level. Arrogant is more accurate. I prefer confident." His reflection in the window smiled slightly. "You gonna tell me I'm wrong?" She wanted to maintain some illusion of control over her own choices, prove she couldn't be predicted or manipulated. But standing in this perfect space, imagining it filled with carefully curated wines and clients who valued expertise over performance, Lena couldn't summon the lie. "No," she admitted quietly. "You're not wrong. I want this. I want to build something that's actually mine." Then let's talk numbers. Dante turned back to Patricia. Give us the actual lease terms, the partition costs, projected sublease income. Everything Lena needs to make an informed decision. They spent the next hour going through details: rental rates, utilities, insurance requirements, timeline for build-out if Lena wanted to create the tasting room she'd mentioned. Patricia was thorough and professional, treating Lena's questions with the respect Richard Hampton never had. By the time they finished, Lena had pages of notes and a calculator full of projections that made her head spin. I need to run these numbers properly, she said as Patricia departed. Build out a real business plan, not just back-of-napkin math. Figure out startup costs beyond just the lease. Take your time. Property will be here. Dante locked up behind them, leading her back to the car. Though I should mention I'm planning to make an offer on the building regardless of whether you decide to lease space. So if you do want in, sooner is better than later. Lena stopped walking. You're buying the building? The entire building? Real estate is my business, remember? This area is about to appreciate significantly. There's a development project starting 2 blocks over that will transform the whole neighborhood. Buying now, before prices spike, is just smart investing. He opened her car door. Though I'll admit your interest in warehouse space did influence my timeline. How generous of you to let your business decisions be influenced by helping me. I'm a complicated man. I contain multitudes. His smile was sharp and amused. Get in. I'll take you back to the apartment so you can run your numbers without me hovering. They drove back through afternoon traffic, Lena's mind churning with possibilities and problems in equal measure. A wine business of her own, it was everything she'd dreamed about during long nights at Hampton Estates, fantasizing about doing things her way without Richard's interference. But dreams required capital she didn't have, expertise she'd need to develop, relationships she'd have to build from scratch now that she'd burned bridges with her former employer. Unless Dante's offer was real, unless she really could leverage his resources and connections to build something viable. What's the catch? She asked abruptly. There has to be a catch. Nobody offers this kind of help without expecting something in return. Dante was quiet for a moment, navigating traffic with the same precise control he seemed to apply to everything. The catch is that if this works, if we build something successful, you'll be tied to me professionally. Every article about your business will mention my investment, my involvement, my reputation. You'll be associated with me in ways that will make some people uncomfortable. You mean associated with a possible criminal? I mean associated with someone who doesn't play by traditional rules and doesn't apologize for it. His hands tightened fractionally on the steering wheel. Some doors will close because of that association. Some people won't take you seriously because you're working with me. You need to decide if what you gain is worth what you'll lose. Lena thought about the doors that were already closing. Hampton Estates, industry colleagues who valued reputation over reality, a mother who cared more about appearances than her daughter's happiness. She thought about Marcus and Victoria, their betrayal, the years she'd wasted trying to fit into a life that never actually fit. I've already lost everything that required me to be someone I'm not, she said quietly. If there are more doors that close because I refuse to apologize for my choices, then those weren't doors worth walking through anyway. Dante's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. You're going to be dangerous once you stop giving a fuck what people think. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, and a warning, probably. He pulled into his building's garage. Come on, let's get you set up with a proper workspace. You've got a business plan to build. The workspace Dante set up for her was a corner of his home office, all floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek furniture that probably cost more than her entire apartment deposit had. He cleared a massive desk, provided her with a laptop when she mentioned hers needed charging, and then disappeared to make phone calls while she dove into spreadsheets and projections with the focused intensity of someone using work to avoid thinking about everything else falling apart. 3 hours later, Lena had a preliminary business plan that was either brilliant or completely insane, and she honestly couldn't tell which. The numbers worked, barely, if she could secure the vineyard relationships she'd built at Hampton Estates and convince them to work with her independently. Big if, considering Richard would absolutely poison those wells the moment he realized she was going into competition. You're frowning at that screen like it personally offended you, Dante observed from the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. Break time. I can't take a break. I need to figure out. Lena gestured helplessly at the laptop. Everything. How to contact vineyard owners without Hampton Estates finding out and sabotaging me. How to build a client base from scratch when my reputation is currently synonymous with public meltdown. How to afford inventory before I have revenue coming in. Which is why you're taking a break. He set one glass in front of her, a deep red that caught the afternoon light like liquid garnets. Drink. Tell me what you're actually worried about instead of hiding behind logistics. Lena took the glass automatically, swirling it to check the legs before she remembered she wasn't performing for clients anymore. The wine was exceptional. A Barolo, if she wasn't mistaken, probably at 10 years old minimum, based on the complexity of aromas rising from the glass. This is too expensive for a random Tuesday afternoon, she said. It's Wednesday, and nothing's too expensive if it serves a purpose. Dante settled into a chair across from her, his own glass cradled casually. You're stalling. What's the real problem? The real problem was that Lena was terrified. Terrified of failing, of proving Richard and her mother and everyone who'd ever doubted her right about her judgment and capabilities. Terrified of succeeding and discovering it still didn't fill the hollow ache where her old life used to be. Terrified of trusting Dante when the last man she'd trusted had destroyed her in the most public way possible. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, the words scraping out like broken glass. Build something from nothing. Be the person people bet on instead of the person who helps other people win. I've spent my entire career making other people successful. Richard, his clients, Marcus, and his networking goals. I don't know how to be the main character of my own story. Dante studied her over the rim of his glass, dark eyes unreadable. You know what I think? I think you've been the main character all along. You just let everyone else take credit for the plot. Every relationship you built with those vineyard owners, that was your expertise and personality, not Hampton Estates' reputation. Every client who trusted your recommendations? They trusted you, not Richard's company letterhead. You've already done the hard work. You just need to stop pretending it belongs to someone else. Easy for you to say. You've probably never doubted yourself a day in your life. His laugh was dark and humorless. You'd be surprised. I spent my entire 20s trying to prove to my father that I could build something bigger than his struggling construction business, while he told me I was arrogant and reckless, and would end up in prison or dead in a gutter. Took me years to stop trying to earn his approval and just build the life I wanted regardless of his opinion. Lena hadn't expected that vulnerability, that admission of doubt from someone who carried himself with such absolute certainty. Did you ever get his approval? He died before I made my first million. Heart attack, sudden and brutal, while screaming at a union rep about overtime costs. Dante swirled his wine, watching the light play through the liquid. I used to think I'd feel vindicated when I succeeded. See, old man, I was right, and you were wrong. But mostly, I just felt empty. Turns out proving people wrong is a lot less satisfying than building something that matters. Is that what you're doing with me? Building something that matters? I'm doing what I always do, identifying opportunities and exploiting them. You're an opportunity, Lena. Brilliant woman with deep expertise and nothing left to lose? That's exactly the kind of partner who builds empires. He paused. But I'd be lying if I said it was purely business. I like you. I like your anger and your refusal to stay down and the way you kissed me like the world was ending. So yes, part of this is strategic investment. Part of it is personal interest. I'm complicated like that. The honesty was disarming. Lena took a long drink of the Barolo, letting its complexity unfold across her palate. Leather and tobacco and dark cherry, perfectly balanced tannins, a finish that lasted forever. This was what she loved about wine, the way a single glass could contain entire worlds of flavor and story. If we do this, she said slowly, if I accept your partnership, I need terms in writing. Clear delineation of responsibilities, profit sharing, exit clauses if it doesn't work out. I'm not going into another relationship where the power dynamics are undefined and I end up getting screwed. Agreed. I'll have my lawyer draft a contract. Dante pulled out his phone, typing notes. Anything else? Creative control. I'm not building a business just to have you override my decisions because you're funding it. Fair. though I reserve the right to question decisions I think are strategically unsound. And I reserve the right to tell you where to shove your questions if I disagree. Lena felt something fierce kindle in her chest, the same reckless energy that had made her kiss him at the gala. This is my expertise, my industry. You provide capital and connections. I provide vision and execution. Equal partnership or nothing. Dante's smile was sharp with approval. There she is, the woman who walked away from a job that didn't deserve her and quit over the phone without flinching. That's the partner I want. Don't get too excited. I might be terrible at this. Then we'll fail spectacularly, and I'll write it off as a learning experience. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To spectacular failures and empire building. Sometimes they're the same thing. Lena clinked her glass against his, feeling the weight of the decision settling into her bones. This was insane. She was entering a business partnership with a man she'd known for barely 36 hours, whose reputation suggested he operated in moral gray areas at best, whose help came with strings she probably couldn't even see yet. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings about terrible judgment and repeating patterns and disaster waiting to happen. But rationality had gotten her a cheating fiancé and a career that never valued her. Maybe it was time to try reckless instead. Okay, she said, the word feeling like jumping off that cliff again. Okay, let's build something. But I need to start making calls, vineyard owners, contacts who might be willing to work with me independently. The longer I wait, the more Richard poisons the well. Make your calls, I'll start working on the contract and property acquisition. Dante stood, finishing his wine. One more thing, you're staying here while we get this off the ground. Guest room's yours as long as you need it. I can't. You can, and you will. Marcus's apartment isn't safe with paparazzi camping outside. You gave up your lease months ago, and getting a new place requires deposits and references you don't currently have. So you stay here, rent-free, until the business is stable enough to support you getting your own space. His tone brooked no argument. Consider it part of the partnership. I need you focused on building this company, not worried about where you're sleeping tonight. Lena wanted to argue, to maintain some independence and dignity, but he was right. She had nowhere else to go that wouldn't involve either confronting Marcus or begging friends for their couches. Temporary, she said firmly, just until I'm on my feet. However long it takes. He headed for the door, then paused. And Lena? Stop apologizing for needing help. Strong people build support systems. Only idiots try to do everything alone. He left before she could respond, and Lena sat there with her wine and her laptop and the dawning realization that she'd just committed to building a business with the most dangerous man she'd ever met. The smart move would be running, far and fast, back to whatever scraps of her old life she could salvage. Instead, she opened her contacts and started making calls. The first 3 vineyard owners didn't answer, which was probably strategic avoidance after seeing the news. The 4th answered but claimed he was too busy to talk, though Lena could hear daytime television in the background. The 5th, Jean-Luc Beaumont, a French winemaker she'd worked with extensively, answered on the 2nd ring. Lena? My dear, I saw the news. Are you all right? His genuine concern made her throat tight. I've been better, Jean-Luc, but I'm calling about business, actually. I've left Hampton Estates and I'm starting my own wine curation company. I was hoping we could discuss continuing our working relationship. Silence. Then, you left Hampton? Or they terminated you? I quit. This morning, before Richard could fire me for the crime of having a personal life that went public. Lena kept her voice steady, professional. I know it's unconventional, but I have significant backing from an investor, and I'm securing warehouse space this week. I can offer you the same terms Hampton provided, possibly better, since I won't have their corporate overhead. And this investor, he is legitimate? Not some scheme that will collapse and leave my wine stranded in a warehouse? Lena thought about Dante's reputation, the whispers of criminal connections, the way people stepped carefully around him. He's very legitimate, very well connected, and very committed to building something sustainable. I will need to think about this. You understand, Hampton Estates has been a reliable partner for years. Your departure changes the equation. I understand, but Jean-Luc, you've told me yourself that Richard undervalues your wines and pushes for lower prices than they deserve. With my company, you set the terms. You control the narrative. I'm not trying to nickel and dime you to boost profit margins. I'm trying to connect your exceptional work with clients who will actually appreciate it. Another pause. Send me a proposal. Detailed terms, your business structure, references from this investor. I will review it seriously, but I make no promises. That's all I'm asking. Thank you, Jean-Luc. She hung up and immediately called 2 more vineyard owners, pitching the same vision, a boutique operation focused on quality and relationships instead of volume and margins. One agreed to review a proposal, the other said no outright. By the time the sun started setting, Lena had made 17 calls and secured exactly 3 maybes, which felt simultaneously like victory and catastrophic failure. How'd it go? Dante appeared with takeout containers and more wine, because apparently his solution to everything involved alcohol and food. 3 possible relationships out of 17 calls. Richard's already been spreading poison. 2 people explicitly mentioned hearing I'd had a breakdown and couldn't be trusted with business relationships. Lena rubbed her eyes, exhausted. This is going to be harder than I thought. Good things usually are. He unpacked what smelled like Thai food, the scents of lemongrass and chili making her stomach growl. But 3 maybes is 3 more than you had this morning. That's progress. That's desperation. They agreed to look at proposals, not actually work with me. Then make the proposals so compelling they can't refuse. Dante handed her a container of pad thai. You're thinking like someone who's afraid of rejection. Think like someone who knows their worth and isn't afraid to demand it. Lena wanted to argue, but her mouth was full of noodles that were absolutely perfect. The right balance of sweet and sour and salty, with just enough heat to make her eyes water slightly. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside the windows. I need to call my mother, she said eventually, dreading the conversation but knowing it couldn't be avoided forever. She's probably having an actual breakdown over the family embarrassment. Want me to leave? No, stay. I might need a witness for when she inevitably says something unforgivable. Lena pulled out her phone, took a fortifying drink of wine, and dialed before she could chicken out. Her mother answered immediately. Lena Marie Whitmore, do you have any idea what you've done? Not "are you okay" or "I'm sorry about Marcus." Just immediate condemnation. Lena closed her eyes, reminding herself to breathe. Hi, Mom. Yes, I know exactly what I've done. I ended an engagement to a man who was cheating on me with Victoria. You made a spectacle of yourself, kissing that criminal in front of everyone we know. The entire garden club has been calling me, asking what possessed you to throw away your future for self-respect? For refusing to be humiliated quietly? Lena's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. Marcus betrayed me, Mom, with my own sister. And your first concern is what the garden club thinks? Marcus made a mistake. Men make mistakes, Lena. You could have handled this privately, worked through it like adults instead of what? Instead of having standards? Instead of accepting that my fiancé preferred my sister? The words were bitter on her tongue. And let's talk about Victoria for a minute. Your other daughter, who you haven't once mentioned. Is she getting calls about her behavior? Are you lecturing her about family embarrassment? Silence. Then quieter but no less cutting. Victoria is heartbroken. She made a terrible choice, but she's devastated by the consequences. She's not the one who kissed a mobster in front of 300 people. No, she's just the one who fucked my fiancé in a public venue where anyone could have seen them. Lena laughed bitterly. But I'm sure that's somehow my fault too. Maybe if I'd been a better fiancé, more attentive, more whatever the hell you think I should have been. Don't you dare speak to me that way. I raised you better than this. You raised me to accept whatever scraps men were willing to give me and be grateful for the privilege. The truth poured out like poison finally lanced from a wound. You raised me to value appearances over reality, to sacrifice my dignity for social acceptance, to apologize for taking up space. Well, I'm done. I'm done performing the role of dutiful daughter who doesn't make waves. Well, if you continue down this path, associating with criminals and burning bridges, don't expect me to what? Support me? You never did anyway, Mom. You supported the version of me that made you look good at garden club meetings. The real me was always an inconvenience. Lena's voice cracked, but she pushed through. I quit my job today. I'm starting my own business. I'm building something that's actually mine, and I don't need your approval or your garden club's opinions to do it. Lena, I have to go. Tell Victoria I hope Marcus is everything she dreamed of. They deserve each other. She hung up before her mother could respond, her hand shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. Dante was quiet for a moment, then simply reached over and refilled her wine glass. That went well. She didn't even ask if I was okay, not once. Lena's laugh was watery, tears threatening. Her daughter's engagement ended in spectacular public fashion, and her main concern is what her friends think. How is that? How can she? Because some people care more about the story they're telling than the people living it. His voice was gentle but matter-of-fact. My father was the same way. Everything was about how things looked to his union buddies and business associates. What we actually felt or needed was irrelevant compared to maintaining the image. How did you deal with it? I stopped caring what he thought and built my own life. Took years and a lot of therapy, but eventually I realized his approval was never actually available. I was chasing something that didn't exist. He paused. Your mother might come around eventually, or she might not. Either way, you can't build your life around her comfort level. Lena wiped her eyes, angry at the tears but unable to stop them. I wanted her to care, to choose me over appearances, just once, to say that what Marcus and Victoria did was wrong, and she was on my side. I know. Dante moved closer, and after a moment's hesitation pulled her into an embrace that was surprisingly solid and comforting. I know it hurts, but you're better off knowing where you stand than hoping for support that's never coming. She let herself lean into his strength for a moment, breathing in cedar and leather and the strange comfort of someone who didn't need her to be anything other than honestly broken. When she finally pulled back, his shirt was damp from her tears, but he didn't seem to care. Sorry, she muttered. I'm not usually this much of a disaster. You're allowed to be a disaster. Your entire life imploded 2 days ago. He handed her a napkin. Though I have to say, you're handling it better than most people would. Lesser individuals would still be in bed eating ice cream and stalking their ex on social media. Who says I haven't been doing that? But Lena felt a small, genuine smile tug at her lips. Thank you. For the food and the wine and the shoulder to cry on. You didn't sign up for this level of emotional chaos. I kissed you at a charity gala and offered you a business partnership. I absolutely signed up for emotional chaos. His expression was wry. Besides, I like you better when you're messy and honest than when you're trying to perform competence. I am competent. I know. That's why the performance isn't necessary. He stood, collecting empty containers. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll work on those proposals and I'll introduce you to my lawyer about the contract. Things will look less insurmountable after rest. Lena doubted that, but she was exhausted enough to try. She retreated to the guest room, showered away the day's disasters, and crawled into bed with her laptop to torture herself by reading more coverage of her public humiliation. The headlines had evolved. Less focus on her supposed breakdown, more interest in Dante Morello's mysterious personal life, and speculation about their relationship status. One article in particular caught her eye, from a business reporter who'd done extensive research on Dante's holdings. The piece painted him as a self-made success story. Grew up in Queens, worked construction with his father, built a small real estate portfolio into a multi-million-dollar empire through aggressive acquisition and development. There were mentions of rumored mob connections, but nothing concrete, just the usual insinuations about how someone from his background couldn't possibly be successful without criminal help. The classism was naked and ugly, and Lena found herself getting angry on his behalf. She knew that dynamic, the assumption that success must be illegitimate if you didn't come from the right background or schools. She'd fought similar battles as a woman in wine, constantly having her expertise questioned in ways her male colleagues never experienced. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Saw you quit Hampton. Good for you. That place was toxic anyway. Coffee tomorrow if you're free? Want to make sure you're actually okay and not just performing okay for the cameras. Lena smiled at her phone, typing back, coffee sounds perfect. And I'm both actually okay and performing okay, which is probably the best I can hope for right now. Maya's response was immediate. That's honest enough for me. 10 a.m. at our usual place. I'll bring emotional support and excessive amounts of caffeine. They confirmed the time, and Lena felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. At least one person in her life saw her as a full human being instead of a scandal or disappointment. That was something. She was about to turn off the light when her phone rang. An unknown number with a New York area code. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello? Lena Whitmore? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. This is Vanessa Chen, Mr. Morello's publicist. I apologize for calling so late, but we need to discuss strategy regarding media coverage of your relationship. My relationship? Lena sat up, suddenly very awake. I don't have a relationship with Dante. We're business partners. The media doesn't see it that way, and frankly, neither will anyone else after those photos from the gala. You're going to be asked about him constantly, whether you're dating, how you met, what your intentions are. We need to get ahead of that narrative before someone else writes it for you. Lena's stomach sank. She hadn't thought about this angle. The kissing Dante wouldn't just be a one-time scandal, but an ongoing story people would pick apart and speculate about. What do you suggest? Honestly, lean into it. The wronged woman finding comfort with a powerful man who treats her right. That's a narrative people love. It positions you as strong and desirable rather than pitiful and rejected, and it gives you a platform to launch your business from a position of interest rather than obscurity. You want me to pretend to be dating Dante for publicity? I want you to not deny dating Dante when asked, and to be seen with him in contexts that suggest intimacy without confirming anything explicit. Let people draw their own conclusions. The ambiguity keeps them interested and gives you both control over the story. It was manipulative and calculating and exactly the kind of image management Lena had always hated. It was also probably smart from a purely strategic standpoint. Does Dante know you're calling me? This was his suggestion. He thought you might be more comfortable discussing it with me first, since I'm not... Vanessa paused delicately. Since I'm a neutral third party. Since you're not the terrifyingly intense man I've known for 2 days who I already kissed in public. Vanessa's laugh was warm and genuine. That too. Look, I know this feels calculated, and it is, but that's my job, taking reality and positioning it strategically. The reality is that you and Dante have chemistry, you're working together, and people are fascinated by that dynamic. We can either let tabloids control that narrative or we can shape it ourselves. Lena thought about Richard's poisonous phone calls to her contacts, her mother's garden club gossip, Marcus's attempts to paint her as unstable. Everyone was already telling stories about her. Maybe it was time to tell her own. I'll think about it, she said finally, and I'll talk to Dante tomorrow, but I'm not agreeing to anything without understanding all the implications. Fair enough. That's all I ask. We'll talk soon, Lena. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this whole situation with remarkable grace. Most people would have crumbled by now. They hung up, and Lena lay back against the pillows, her mind spinning with new complications. A fake relationship for publicity, strategic positioning, image management. It felt dishonest, manipulative, everything she'd claimed to hate about performing for an audience. But was it really so different from what she'd been doing her entire career? Playing the role of respectable fiancée, dutiful daughter, professional wine expert who didn't make waves? At least this performance would serve her own goals instead of someone else's comfort. She was still turning it over in her mind when sleep finally claimed her, pulling her down into dreams of vineyards and warehouses and Dante's dark eyes watching her like she was something worth studying. The next morning brought coffee with Maya at their usual cafe in the village, a tiny place with mismatched furniture and the best cortados in Manhattan. Maya took one look at Lena and pulled her into a fierce hug that lasted long enough to make other patrons stare. You look like hell, Maya said fondly, steering her to their favorite corner table. But like hell in a purposeful way. How are you really? Unemployed, homeless, publicly humiliated, and entering a business partnership with a man whose Wikipedia page uses the word alleged more than actual facts. Lena accepted the cortado Maya ordered for her. So, living my best life. The Dante Morello thing, that's real? The business partnership? He's investing in a wine curation company I'm building. We're signing contracts this week, assuming his lawyer doesn't find some reason to back out. Lena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I know how it looks. Trust me. I know. But Maya, I've never felt more clear-headed about a decision in my life. Is that insane? Maybe. Or maybe you're finally making choices for yourself instead of for everyone else's approval. Maya studied her with sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. You seem different. More yourself, somehow. More myself or more unhinged? Can it be both? Maya grinned, then sobered. I'm serious, though. I've watched you dim yourself for years. For Marcus, for your mother, for that asshole Richard. You were always performing this role of perfect girlfriend, perfect daughter, perfect employee. This is the first time I've seen you just be. Even if being means kissing dangerous men and starting businesses on impulse. Lena felt tears prick her eyes again, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance. Thank you for not lecturing me about bad decisions. Oh, you're definitely making questionable choices. But they're your questionable choices, made with full agency and awareness. That's growth. Maya reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Plus, I looked up Dante Morello. If you're going to have a public meltdown and kiss someone, you could do worse than stupidly attractive real estate mogul with mysterious background. We're not, Lena caught herself. His publicist called last night. She wants me to not deny dating him, let people assume there's a relationship to generate publicity for the business launch. Smart. People love a good romance narrative, especially when it's wrapped up in scandal and redemption. Maya considered. Are you going to do it? I don't know. It feels dishonest. More dishonest than pretending you were happy with Marcus for 3 years? The question was gentle but pointed. Lena, you've been performing your whole life. At least this performance serves your actual goals instead of someone else's comfort. It was almost exactly what Lena had thought last night, and hearing it confirmed by her best friend made the decision feel less like moral compromise and more like strategic evolution. When did you get so wise about image management? I work in PR, babe. This is literally what I do. Maya pulled out her phone. Speaking of which, want me to look at your social media? Make sure you're not accidentally making things worse? They spent the next hour strategizing what Lena should post, how to handle comments, which interview requests to ignore, and which might actually be beneficial. Maya was ruthlessly efficient, deleting Lena's defensive responses to trolls and crafting neutral statements that neither confirmed nor denied anything while maintaining dignity. There, Maya said finally, showing Lena the edited version of her Instagram. Professional, composed, focused on moving forward. You acknowledge what happened without apologizing for it, and you signal that you're building something new without giving away details. Lena read through the proposed post, grateful for the relationships I've built in the wine industry and excited for the next chapter. Sometimes endings create space for better beginnings. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with genuine support. It's perfect, she admitted. When did I become someone who needs social media strategy? When you became someone worth talking about. Lean into it, Lena. You're news now. Might as well make the news work for you. They parted with promises to check in daily, and Lena headed back to Dante's apartment feeling more centered than she had since the gala. The doorman greeted her by name now, which was both convenient and slightly unsettling. She'd been here less than 48 hours, but apparently she was already recognized as belonging. She found Dante in his office on a video call, speaking rapid Italian to someone who seemed to be giving him grief about construction delays. He waved her in, gesturing for her to sit, while he finished the conversation with what sounded like creative profanity and a threat to personally oversee the project if they didn't get their shit together. Sorry, he said after hanging up. Contractor problems in Sicily. How was coffee with your friend? Illuminating. She works in PR and gave me a crash course in social media management. Lena settled into the chair across from his desk. Also, your publicist called last night. I heard. What did you think? I think Vanessa is very good at her job and probably right about the strategic benefits of ambiguous relationship status. Lena met his eyes. I also think it's manipulative, and you should have discussed it with me before having her call. You're right. I apologize. No deflection, no excuses, just immediate acknowledgement. I thought having a neutral party present the idea might feel less pressured than me asking directly, but I should have confirmed you were comfortable with the conversation first. The apology disarmed her, catching her off balance. Marcus had never apologized for anything without qualifiers and excuses. Thank you for acknowledging that. I'm not perfect, but I try to own my mistakes. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her. So, what do you want to do about the publicity angle? I want to understand what I'm agreeing to. What does ambiguous relationship status actually mean in practice? It means we don't confirm or deny anything to media. We're seen together in contexts that could be business or personal, dinners, events, the occasional photo opportunity. We maintain plausible deniability while letting people draw their own conclusions. He paused. It doesn't require anything physical beyond what we've already done, and it can end whenever you want. We simply pivot to the truth that we're business partners who were briefly romantically involved, but decided to keep things professional. And this benefits the business how? By making you interesting instead of pitiful. By associating your brand with luxury and power instead of public humiliation. By giving you a platform that Marcus and Richard can't touch because they're not part of the story anymore. His voice was clinical, strategic. People who wouldn't give a damn about another wine curator will pay attention to the woman who captured Dante Morello's interest. That's leverage you can use. It made sense in a calculating, slightly mercenary way that Lena was surprised to find she didn't hate. And what do you get out of it? Positive publicity showing me in a relationship with an accomplished professional instead of just the usual speculation about criminal enterprises. Softens my image, makes me more palatable to legitimate business partners. He smiled slightly. Plus, I get to spend time with someone who challenges me instead of just agreeing with everything I say. That's worth something. Lena absorbed this, weighing options and implications. If I agree, and I'm not saying I am, I need boundaries. No actual relationship expectations, no possessiveness, no jealousy if either of us actually dates someone else. This is performance, not reality. Agreed. Though, for the record, I'm not currently interested in dating anyone else. That's not... I didn't mean... Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm just establishing parameters. I know, and I'm telling you honestly that while this might be performance, the interest isn't entirely fake. His dark eyes held hers steadily. I like you, Lena. I respect your expertise. I'm attracted to your refusal to apologize for taking up space, and I think we could build something genuinely valuable together, both in business and potentially in other contexts. But I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. The ball's in your court. The honesty was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. Lena had spent so long with Marcus's games and manipulation that straightforward declaration of interest felt like a foreign language. I need to think about it. Take your time. In the meantime, my lawyer's here with the contract. Want to review it together? They spent the next 2 hours going through pages of legal language that basically boiled down to Dante provided capital and connections, Lena provided expertise and execution, profits split 60-40 in Dante's favor initially, shifting to 50-50 after costs were recouped. Exit clauses if things went south, non-compete agreements, clear definitions of decision-making authority. This is fair, Lena admitted, surprised. She'd expected terms heavily weighted in Dante's favor, the usual investor power play. More than fair, actually. But I told you, I want a partner, not an employee. Partners need equal footing to build something sustainable. He signed his name with a flourish, then slid the document to her. Your turn. Make it official. Lena stared at the signature line, pen hovering. This was it. The moment of actual commitment, of burning the last bridge back to her old life. Once she signed this, she was all in on building something from scratch with a man she barely knew, betting everything on her own expertise and his resources. She signed her name, the ink flowing smooth and certain across expensive paper. Welcome to the Empire, Dante said, his smile sharp and satisfied. Now let's go make everyone who doubted you regret it. The next 3 months moved with the kind of velocity that left Lena breathless and exhilarated in equal measure. The warehouse in Red Hook became operational by mid-February. Transformed from empty industrial space, into a temperature-controlled wine sanctuary that made her chest ache with pride every time she walked through the doors. Dante had been ruthlessly efficient with the renovation, bringing in contractors who worked around the clock to install the climate systems and custom storage racks that Lena had designed herself after dozens of sleepless nights sketching possibilities. She'd secured relationships with 8 vineyard owners by the end of January, each one requiring careful negotiation and promises backed by Dante's financial credibility. Jean-Luc had come through first, sending a shipment of his exceptional Burgundies with a note that read, "Your passion reminds me why I make wine. Don't let the bastards dim that light." 2 others followed within days, and suddenly Lena had inventory worth 6 figures sitting in her warehouse, waiting for clients who didn't exist yet. That's where Vanessa proved her worth. Within a week of Lena agreeing to the ambiguous relationship strategy, carefully staged photographs appeared in society pages. Lena and Dante at a wine tasting benefit, her hand resting casually on his arm while they examined a rare vintage. Another showed them leaving a restaurant in Soho, his hand at the small of her back, both of them laughing at something off camera. The captions speculated wildly about their relationship status, which neither confirmed nor denied. The attention was uncomfortable at first, photographers appearing at unexpected moments, strangers recognizing her on the street. But it translated directly into business inquiries. Wealthy collectors who wanted to meet the woman who'd captured Dante Morello's interest, clients curious about what kind of wine expertise could attract such a notoriously private man. Lena leveraged every conversation into potential sales, her natural expertise shining through once people got past the scandal that had brought her to their attention. "You're a natural at this," Maya observed during one of their weekly coffee meetings, scrolling through Lena's latest press coverage. "Playing the publicity game like you've been doing it your whole life." "I have been doing it my whole life," Lena countered, sipping an Americano that had gone cold while she worked on her laptop. "I just used to play it for other people's benefit instead of my own." By March, Whitmore Wine Collective, the name she'd chosen after rejecting Dante's suggestion of something more corporate, had a client roster of 43 carefully curated collectors and restaurants. The revenue wasn't substantial yet, mostly deposits on future deliveries and consultation fees, but it was real money earned through her expertise rather than someone else's patronage. She'd hired 2 part-time assistants to help with logistics and customer service, both young women trying to break into the wine industry who reminded Lena of herself 5 years ago, hungry and talented and tired of being underestimated. "How does it feel?" Dante asked one evening in late March, joining her at the warehouse where she was doing inventory. "Being your own boss, calling your own shots." Lena looked up from her clipboard, taking in the rows of carefully organized bottles representing relationships she'd built and maintained through her own credibility. "Terrifying and exhilarating. Sometimes both at once, usually right before I fall asleep, and my brain starts cataloging everything that could go wrong." Welcome to entrepreneurship. The anxiety never really goes away, you just get better at functioning through it. He pulled a bottle from a nearby rack, one of Jean-Luc's Burgundies, and examined the label with appreciation. "You've built something real here, Lena. In 3 months, you've created what most people take years to achieve. I had advantages most people don't have, your capital, your connections, Vanessa's publicity machine, which you've leveraged brilliantly. Stop diminishing your own achievement." His voice carried that edge of command that still made her spine straighten involuntarily. "You could have taken my money and failed spectacularly. Instead, you've turned investment into revenue and interest into actual relationships. That's your expertise and vision, not my checkbook." The praise made something warm unfurl in Lena's chest, dangerous in its intensity. She'd been living in Dante's guest room for 3 months now, seeing him daily as they worked on building the business, sharing meals and wine, and increasingly personal conversations late into the night. The line between performance and reality had started blurring in ways that probably should have worried her more than it did. "We should celebrate," Dante said abruptly. 3 months in business, exceeding every projection. That deserves recognition." "Celebrate how? Another strategic photo opportunity for Vanessa to distribute?" His smile was sharp and genuine. "I was thinking something actually fun instead of performative. Dinner at 11 Madison Park, no photographers, no business talk. Just good food and better wine and conversation that doesn't revolve around profit margins. Lena's heart did something complicated in her chest. That sounds suspiciously like a real date instead of strategic positioning. Maybe I'm tired of strategy. Dante stepped closer, his presence filling her space in ways that made her acutely aware of how long it had been since Marcus, since anyone had looked at her with genuine desire instead of calculated interest. Maybe I want to take you to dinner because I enjoy your company and want to see you in a dress that isn't chosen for maximum publicity impact. Dante, before you overthink this into oblivion, I'm not asking for anything beyond dinner. No expectations, no pressure, just an evening that's about us instead of the empire we're building. He paused, dark eyes searching her face. Unless you're not interested, in which case we'll forget I suggested it and go back to our regularly scheduled business partnership. Lena should say no. Should maintain the boundaries she'd established, keep their relationship purely professional despite the performance for cameras. Getting actually involved with Dante Morello, beyond strategic positioning and mutual benefit, was asking for complications she didn't need while building a business from scratch. But standing in her warehouse, surrounded by evidence of what they'd built together, looking at a man who'd given her resources and space to become the person she'd always had the potential to be, Lena found she didn't want to say no. "Dinner sounds good," she said quietly. "Really good, actually. But Dante, I need you to know I'm not ready for anything serious. I'm still processing the Marcus situation, still figuring out who I am outside relationships that defined me. I don't want to trade one dependency for another." Noted and respected. His hand came up to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, the gesture achingly tender. "For what it's worth, I'm not looking for you to depend on me. I like you better as an equal partner who challenges my assumptions and doesn't take my shit." "I do take your shit. You're incredibly bossy about restaurant choices, and you reorganize my filing system every time you visit the warehouse." "Because your filing system is chaos masquerading as organization." But he was smiling, genuine warmth reaching his eyes. "Friday night, I'll make reservations." "Friday night," Lena agreed and tried not to think about how much she was looking forward to it. The intervening days passed in a blur of client meetings and shipment coordination. Lena was finalizing details for a major order. A restaurant group wanted to overhaul their entire wine program with her consultation, when her phone rang with a number she hadn't seen in months. Marcus. She stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering, curiosity overriding common sense. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Lena." "God, it's good to hear your voice." He sounded tired, defeated in ways that would have broken her heart 4 months ago. "I know I don't have the right to call, but I needed to talk to you, to apologize properly, not through drunk texts at 3 in the morning. You could have apologized in January or February or any of the dozens of times I ignored your calls." Lena kept her voice level, professional, like Marcus was a difficult client instead of a man who'd shattered her world. "Why now?" Silence. Then, "Because Victoria left me. Turns out she was only interested when you were the one she was taking me from. The moment we were actually together, all the excitement disappeared." His laugh was bitter. "She said I was boring, that being with me felt like playing house instead of actually living." Lena should feel vindicated, should take pleasure in Marcus getting exactly what he deserved after choosing Victoria over her. Instead, she just felt tired and vaguely sad for everyone involved in the disaster. "I'm sorry that happened to you, genuinely, but I'm not sure why you're telling me." "Because I was an idiot. Because I threw away the best thing in my life for nothing, basically. A fantasy that disappeared the moment it became reality." His voice cracked. "I miss you, Lena. I miss us. And I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. Can we talk? Really talk about what happened and where we went wrong?" 4 months ago, this call would have destroyed her. Would have sent her spiraling into questions about whether she'd given up too easily, whether their relationship could have been salvaged if she'd just tried harder. But standing in her warehouse surrounded by the business she'd built from the ashes of that relationship, Lena felt nothing but distant pity for the man who'd once been her entire world. "Marcus, I appreciate the apology, I do, but we're not getting back together." She said it gently but firmly. like explaining vintage ratings to a novice collector. What you and Victoria did hurt me deeply, but it also freed me from a relationship where I was never actually seen for who I am. You loved the idea of me. The perfect fiancé who made you look good and didn't demand too much. You never loved the real me because you never bothered to know her. That's not true. It is true. You didn't know my actual dreams beyond the performance I gave you. Lena felt something release in her chest, old pain finally letting go. I'm building a life now where I don't have to perform for anyone's approval. I'm successful and happy and genuinely thriving. I don't want to go back to who I was when I was with you. You're with him now, aren't you? Dante Morello, the criminal you kissed to hurt me. Marcus's voice hardened with familiar petulance. That's what this is really about. You found someone with more money and power, and you're using him the same way you're accusing me of using you. Actually, I found someone who respects my expertise and supports my ambitions without needing me to make myself smaller to accommodate his ego. But believe whatever makes you feel better about your choices, Marcus. I'm done justifying mine. She hung up before he could respond, blocking the number immediately. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline surging through her system. But beneath the shakiness was something solid and unbreakable, the certainty that she'd made the right choice in walking away, in building something new instead of trying to resurrect something that was never actually alive. That sounded intense, one of her assistants said from across the warehouse, concern evident. You okay? Yeah? Lena smiled, surprised to find it genuine. Yeah, I really am. Friday arrived with the kind of nervous anticipation Lena hadn't felt since college, when dates still felt like adventures instead of obligations. She spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing a dress, something elegant but not trying too hard, sophisticated but not corporate. She finally settled on a deep emerald silk that made her dark hair and eyes pop, with a neckline just low enough to be interesting without being obvious. Dante's reaction when she emerged from her room made the effort worthwhile. His eyes darkened with appreciation, sweeping over her in a way that made her skin heat. You look stunning, he said simply, though I should probably mention I'm going to have a very hard time focusing on conversation. Good. I'd hate to be the only one distracted. Lena accepted the wrap he held out, letting him drape it over her shoulders with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his usual commanding presence. 11. Madison Park was everything she'd heard. Elegant and intimate, with service so attentive it bordered on telepathic. They were seated at a corner table with enough privacy for genuine conversation, but enough visibility that Lena suspected Vanessa had been consulted about the optics. She was learning to recognize the publicist's subtle fingerprints on their carefully managed public life. No business talk tonight, Dante reminded her as they reviewed wine options. I want to know about the Lena who exists outside spreadsheets and client negotiations. That Lena is still figuring herself out, she admitted, selecting a burgundy that would pair beautifully with their planned tasting menu. I spent so long being what other people needed that I'm not entirely sure what I want just for me. Then let's figure it out together. Tell me something true that you've never told anyone else. The request was intimate in its simplicity, demanding vulnerability she'd been carefully guarding. Lena took a sip of wine, letting its complexity ground her. I don't actually like most wine, she said finally. I mean, I appreciate it professionally. I understand quality and terroir and all the technical aspects, but given a choice between a rare vintage and a cold beer on a hot day, I'd take the beer every time. Dante's laugh was surprised and delighted. You're a wine curator who doesn't like wine? That's either deeply ironic or brilliantly subversive. It's honest. I love the art of winemaking. The relationships with people who pour their souls into every bottle, the way the right wine can transform a moment into a memory. But the drinking itself? It's work more than pleasure. She paused, emboldened by his genuine interest. Your turn. Tell me something true. I'm not actually dangerous. He said it quietly, dark eyes serious. I know my reputation. I know what people whisper about me. Some of it's earned. I've made aggressive business decisions, and I don't back down from fights. But I've never hurt anyone who didn't come at me first. I'm not the mobster everyone assumes I am. Then why let people think you are? Why not fight the narrative? Because fear is useful in business. People who think I'm dangerous won't try to cheat me. They'll honor contracts and maintain relationships because crossing me seems too risky. He swirled his wine thoughtfully. But with you, I don't want that distance. I want you to know the real version, not the performance. The admission made Lena's chest tight with something that felt dangerously like affection. I think we're both pretty good at performance. Maybe too good. Maybe. Or maybe we're just learning that authenticity is scarier than any role we could play. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I like you, Lena. The real you. The one who doesn't like wine and quit her job over the phone and kissed me because she was angry enough to stop caring about consequences. That woman is worth knowing. That woman is still figuring out how to exist without apology. But she didn't pull her hand away, letting the connection settle into something comfortable and right. What do you want, Dante? Really want? Beyond the business and the empire building? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. I want to build something that matters beyond just making money. I want to be known for creating opportunities instead of just exploiting them. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. I want someone who sees the actual me and chooses to stay anyway, instead of staying because of what I can provide. The honesty was devastating in its simplicity. Lena understood that desire too well, the longing to be valued for who you were, rather than what you could offer. She'd spent years being Marcus's perfect fiancée, her mother's acceptable daughter, Richard's competent employee. Being just Lena, without qualifiers or performance, felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. I think we both deserve that, she said quietly, to be seen and chosen for who we actually are. The rest of dinner passed in conversation that ranged from deep to ridiculous, childhood memories and favorite books, and the kind of vulnerable honesty that only happens when two people decide to stop performing for each other. Dante told her about growing up in Queens, watching his father slowly destroy himself trying to maintain a business that was never going to succeed. Lena shared stories about her father and their wine-soaked conversations, the way grief had shaped her into someone who held on to things too tightly because loss felt inevitable. They were lingering over dessert when Lena's phone buzzed insistently. She'd silenced it for dinner, but the repeated vibration suggested an emergency. I'm sorry, I should check this. The screen showed 5 missed calls from her warehouse manager and 3 increasingly frantic texts. Fire at the warehouse. Fire department here. Need you ASAP. Lena's blood turned to ice. We have to go, now. There's a fire at the warehouse. Dante didn't ask questions, just signaled for the check and had them in his car within 3 minutes. The drive to Red Hook felt endless, every traffic light a personal torment while Lena's mind spiraled through worst-case scenarios. 3 months of work, hundreds of thousands in inventory, relationships built on promises of secure storage and professional handling, all potentially going up in smoke. They arrived to find fire trucks surrounding the building, their lights painting the night in hellish reds and blues. Firefighters were still working, though the flames appeared controlled. Lena stumbled out of the car, her elegant heels absurd against cracked pavement, and made it approximately 10 steps before someone caught her arm. Ma'am, you can't go closer. Building's not secure. That's my business. All my inventory, my client's property. Her voice cracked. Please, I need to know how bad it is. A fire captain approached, his face streaked with soot. You the owner? Whitmore Wine Collective? Yes. What happened? How bad is the damage? Could have been worse. Sprinkler system contained most of it to the loading dock area. We've got the fire controlled now, but you're looking at significant smoke and water damage throughout the building. Won't know the full extent until we can do a proper assessment tomorrow. Smoke and water damage. To wine that required precise climate control and pristine conditions. Lena felt her knees buckle, but Dante's arm came around her waist, holding her upright. Any indication of cause? Dante asked, his voice deadly calm. Too early to say definitively. Could be electrical, could be careless smoking near the loading dock. The captain paused. Could be intentional. We found evidence of accelerant near the point of origin. Arson, Dante said flatly. Someone set this deliberately. The captain wouldn't commit, citing ongoing investigation, but his expression confirmed Dante's suspicion. Someone had tried to destroy Lena's business, Someone had looked at everything she'd built and decided to burn it down. "Marcus," Lena whispered, horror and rage competing for dominance. "He called me this week, wanted to get back together. When I said no, we don't know that." But Dante's jaw was tight with fury barely contained. "Though we're going to find out. Captain, I want copies of your investigation report as soon as they're available, and I'm hiring my own fire investigator to assess the scene." They spent the next 3 hours dealing with logistics, insurance calls, statements to investigators, coordinating with the few warehouse staff who'd arrived after hearing the news. By the time Lena and Dante returned to his apartment, it was nearly 3 in the morning, and Lena was running on adrenaline and coffee fumes. "How bad?" she asked, collapsing onto his couch, still wearing her ruined dress. "Financially, how bad is this?" Dante was quiet for a moment, his expression serious. "Insurance will cover most of the physical damage to the building and hopefully the inventory, assuming the claim isn't contested. But we're looking at weeks, maybe months of interrupted operations while we restore and restock. Client relationships built on reliability and security, those take a hit that money can't fix immediately. So everything I've built, gone. 3 months of work, destroyed because someone—" She couldn't even finish the sentence, fury and despair choking her. "Not gone. Damaged, yes. Set back significantly, absolutely. But not gone." Dante sat beside her, his presence solid and grounding. "We have client relationships, vineyard connections, your expertise and reputation. The physical space can be rebuilt. The inventory can be replaced. What matters, the actual foundation of the business, that's still intact." "You don't understand. Those clients trusted me with bottles worth thousands of dollars each, with collections they've spent decades building. And now I have to call them and say, sorry, there was a fire, your wine might be destroyed or damaged beyond salvage." Lena's voice cracked. "How do I come back from that? How do I convince anyone to trust me again when I couldn't even protect what they'd already given me?" "By being honest about what happened and how you're fixing it, by offering compensation where appropriate and fighting like hell to restore everything that was damaged, by proving that you're someone who faces disasters head-on instead of running away." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You built this business from nothing once. You can rebuild it from damage." Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to find that fierce determination that had made her quit Hampton Estates and start over. But exhaustion and shock had finally caught up to her, and all she felt was hollow and defeated. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of fighting and rebuilding and proving myself over and over again. Why does everything have to be so hard?" "Because easy things aren't worth the effort." Dante pulled her against his side, and Lena let herself lean into his strength. "But you don't have to fight alone. That's what partners are for." They sat like that for a while, the city lights glittering through the windows like false stars. Lena felt tears track down her face, smudging what remained of her makeup, but she was too exhausted to care about appearances. Her beautiful dress was ruined, her business was damaged, and someone had literally tried to burn down everything she'd built. "Stay with me tonight," Dante said quietly. "Not in the guest room. Here, where I can make sure you're actually okay instead of spiraling alone." It should have felt like crossing a line they'd carefully maintained. Instead, it felt like coming home to safety after months of performing strength. Lena nodded against his shoulder, too wrung out to overthink the implications. He carried her to his bedroom, actually carried her, like she weighed nothing, and helped her out of the ruined dress with the same tenderness he'd shown helping her into her wrap earlier that evening. Found one of his shirts for her to sleep in, settled her in his bed with the kind of care usually reserved for something precious and breakable. "Sleep," he murmured, sliding in beside her but maintaining respectful distance. "Tomorrow, we start fighting back. Tonight you rest." Lena curled into his warmth, letting exhaustion finally pull her under. Her last conscious thought was that she should feel more conflicted about this, about blurring lines and depending on someone who could hurt her as badly as Marcus had. But wrapped in Dante's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, all she felt was safe. The morning brought harsh reality in the form of insurance adjusters, fire investigators, and a growing list of clients who'd heard about the fire and wanted assurances about their collections. Lena handled each call with professional composure that felt like performance art, promising thorough assessments and appropriate compensation while privately wondering how she'd deliver on those promises with a damaged warehouse and depleted resources. "We need to find out who did this," she said to Dante over coffee that had gone cold while she fielded her 15th client call. "If it was Marcus, if he did this because I rejected him, then he's made a very serious mistake." Dante's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made Lena's spine straighten with awareness. "I've got people looking into it. Security footage from neighboring buildings, statements from anyone who was in the area last night. If Marcus was involved, we'll have proof." "And then what? We call the police? Press charges?" Lena rubbed her eyes, exhaustion making her skull ache. "That's more publicity, more scandal, more distraction from actually rebuilding the business." "That's one option. There are others." Something dark flickered in Dante's expression, a glimpse of the dangerous man everyone assumed he was. Less public options that ensure he never tries something like this again. "Dante, no. Whatever you're thinking, no. I won't let you—" She caught herself, unsure what exactly she was forbidding, but certain it involved the kind of consequences that would prove everyone's worst assumptions about him right. "I'm not going to hurt him if that's what you're worried about." His smile was sharp and humorless, though the thought has considerable appeal, but there are legal ways to make someone's life very difficult, and I'm exceptionally good at exploiting them. Marcus has a career, a reputation, business relationships that can all be complicated if the right pressure is applied. Lena should have been horrified by the casual threat. Instead, she felt something fierce and vindictive unfurl in her chest. The same reckless anger that had made her kiss Dante at the gala, only now tempered by 3 months of learning to channel rage into strategy. "If we're going to destroy him," she said slowly, "we do it right. No half measures, no warnings. We systematically dismantle everything he's built the way he tried to dismantle mine. And we do it clean enough that he can't prove anything but knows exactly who was responsible." Dante's smile turned genuine, proud, and slightly predatory. "Now that's the Lena I know. Welcome back." The evidence arrived 3 days later in the form of security footage from a bodega 2 blocks from the warehouse. The timestamp showed Marcus's distinctive BMW pulling up at 11:47 p.m. the night of the fire. Marcus himself clearly visible exiting the vehicle wearing a dark hoodie and gloves. He disappeared toward the warehouse for 18 minutes before returning, walking quickly with his head down and driving away. 40 minutes later, the fire started. "Idiot didn't even think to check for cameras," Dante's investigator said, sliding the USB drive across the conference table. "Or maybe he thought his prep school education made him smarter than basic surveillance. Either way, we've got him cold." Lena stared at the frozen image of Marcus's face caught in streetlight and felt something ice-cold settle in her chest. He'd actually done it, had actually tried to destroy her business, her livelihood, everything she'd built, because she'd rejected him, because his ego couldn't handle her choosing herself over his second-chance fantasy. "This goes to the police," she said, her voice steady despite the rage vibrating through her system. "We press charges, arson, destruction of property, whatever else the DA can make stick." "Agreed, but that's just the beginning." Dante pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "While the criminal case winds through the courts, we make his life professionally impossible. I've already had my people reach out to his employer. Turns out several of his recent deals involved questionable accounting practices. Nothing illegal enough to prosecute without deeper investigation, but enough to make his bosses very nervous about keeping him on staff. You found financial irregularities in 3 days? I found them in 6 hours. The rest of the time was spent documenting everything thoroughly enough to be actionable." His smile was sharp and satisfied. Marcus Chen is very good at looking successful while cutting corners. Once people start actually scrutinizing his work, instead of just accepting his Harvard credentials, the whole house of cards collapses pretty quickly. Lena should have felt guilty about the systematic destruction they were planning. Should have been the bigger person, let the legal system handle justice, moved forward without revenge. But looking at Marcus's face on that screen, the casual entitlement of someone who'd tried to burn down her dreams because she wouldn't feed his ego, she couldn't summon any mercy. "Do it," she said. "All of it. I want him to understand exactly what it feels like to lose everything because someone decided you weren't worth their loyalty." The investigation moved with surprising speed once they handed over the evidence. Marcus was arrested within a week, the charges making headlines that Vanessa strategically distributed to maximum effect. The narrative wrote itself. Scorned ex-fiancé attempts to destroy successful businesswoman's company in act of petty revenge. Public opinion, already sympathetic to Lena after the original gala scandal, turned viciously against Marcus. His employer placed him on immediate leave pending their own investigation. His social media accounts were flooded with condemnation. Every news outlet that had covered Lena's public meltdown now wanted statements about Marcus's arrest. "How does it feel?" Maya asked during one of their coffee meetings, watching Lena scroll through the latest coverage. "Seeing him get what he deserves?" "Empty," Lena admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "I thought vindication would feel satisfying, but mostly I just feel tired. Tired of Marcus taking up space in my life. Tired of revenge plots and legal proceedings. Tired of everything being about the past instead of the future." "That's probably healthy, even if it's anticlimactic." Maya studied her with knowing eyes. "So what is the future? Beyond rebuilding the warehouse and destroying your ex?" The question made Lena pause. The warehouse restoration was progressing well. Insurance had paid out after the arson evidence made their claim undeniable, and Dante had brought in contractors who worked with the same ruthless efficiency as everything else he touched. They'd be operational again within a month, with upgraded systems and better security. Her clients had been remarkably understanding once she'd explained the situation honestly, many of them actually increasing their orders in a show of support that made her throat tight with gratitude. But beyond the immediate crisis management, Lena hadn't thought much about what came next. She'd been so focused on survival and revenge that she'd forgotten to consider what she actually wanted once the fighting was over. "I don't know," she said slowly. "I've spent 4 months in reactive mode, responding to Marcus's betrayal, building the business, dealing with the fire. I haven't stopped to think about what I'm building toward, beyond just proving everyone wrong. Maybe it's time to start thinking about that." Maya's voice was gentle but pointed. "You've proven you can survive disaster and build something from nothing. Now you get to decide what that something becomes." The conversation stayed with Lena over the following weeks as spring settled into early summer and the warehouse reopened with a celebration that doubled as strategic publicity event. Vanessa had orchestrated it beautifully, intimate tasting for key clients and press, Lena giving a brief speech about resilience and community support, Dante at her side looking devastating in a tailored suit and providing just enough romantic ambiguity to keep people speculating. "To new beginnings," Lena said, raising her glass to the assembled guests, "and to everyone who believed in this vision, even when it literally went up in flames. Thank you for your faith and your patience. I promise it won't be misplaced." The applause was genuine, and Lena felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't performance anymore. This was real achievement, real relationships, real success built on her expertise and determination. She'd done this. Not Dante's money or Vanessa's publicity or anyone else's help, though all of that mattered, but the core of it, the vision and execution and sheer stubborn refusal to stay down, that was all her. Later, after the guests had departed and the cleanup crew was handling the remaining mess, Lena found Dante on the warehouse terrace they'd added during renovations. The city sprawled before them, lights beginning to twinkle as evening deepened into night. "Successful relaunch," he observed, handing her a glass of champagne. "Your speech was perfect, confident without being arrogant, grateful without being servile. Very you." High praise from someone who's made a career of reading people. Lena accepted the glass, enjoying the cool fizz against her lips. "Thank you. For all of this. For believing in me when I barely believed in myself. I told you I saw potential worth investing in. You've exceeded every projection and expectation." He paused, something careful in his expression. "Though I should probably tell you that my investment motivations have gotten significantly more complicated over the past few months." Lena's heart kicked against her ribs. "Complicated how?" "Complicated in that I'm supposed to maintain professional boundaries with my business partners, and I'm finding that increasingly difficult when the partner in question is brilliant and beautiful and sleeping in my bed most nights." His dark eyes held hers steadily. "We've been performing a relationship for publicity, but somewhere along the way the performance became real for me. And I need to know if it became real for you too, or if I'm about to make a spectacular fool of myself." The vulnerability in his admission made Lena's chest ache. She thought about the past 4 months, the way Dante had supported her ambitions without trying to control them, had given her resources without demanding compliance, had seen her at her absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway. The way she'd started sleeping in his bed not because of nightmares or disaster, but because she wanted to wake up next to him. The way her first instinct when anything happened, good or bad, was to tell him about it. "It became real," she said quietly. "Probably around the time you carried me to bed after the fire and I realized I trusted you with more than just business partnership. Maybe before that, if I'm honest. But Dante, I'm still figuring out who I am outside relationships that defined me. I don't want to lose myself again just because I'm falling for someone." "Then don't." He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. "Fall for me while staying completely yourself. Build your empire, and I'll build mine, and we'll figure out how they fit together as we go. No performance, no roles, just two complicated people choosing each other without apology." "That simple. That complicated." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I think we're both stubborn enough to make it work." Lena reached up to pull him down into a kiss that was nothing like their first one at the gala. That had been performance and desperation and rage channeled into spectacle. This was deliberate and real, a choice made with full awareness of consequences and possibilities. Dante kissed her like she was something precious, his hands gentle in her hair while his mouth moved over hers with building heat. "Take me home," Lena whispered against his lips. "Our home. Not the guest room, not performance for cameras, actually home." His smile was brilliant and real. "Thought you'd never ask." The following week settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable in ways Lena's old life never had. She worked brutal hours getting the business fully operational again, but they were hours she chose for goals she'd set herself. Dante handled his own empire building with the same focused intensity, and they came together in evenings that mixed business strategy with genuine intimacy. Sometimes they talked about wine distribution and real estate development. Sometimes they argued about restaurant choices and filing systems, and whose turn it was to deal with Vanessa's increasingly creative publicity suggestions. Sometimes they just existed together in comfortable silence, reading or working while occupying the same space. It felt adult and real in ways that made Lena realize how performative her relationship with Marcus had been. There was no pretending with Dante. He'd seen her at absolute rock bottom and stayed. She'd seen his ruthless business practices and darker impulses and chosen him anyway. They were equals building separate empires that complemented rather than competed. Marcus's trial came and went with appropriate drama. He pleaded guilty to arson and destruction of property, accepting a plea deal that involved prison time and substantial restitution. Lena attended the sentencing, sitting in the gallery with Dante's solid presence beside her, and felt nothing but relief when the judge handed down 2 years and court-ordered therapy. "It's over," she said afterward, standing on the courthouse steps while summer sun beat down with oppressive heat. "Finally, actually over." "How do you feel?" Dante asked, the same question he'd posed months ago after she quit Hampton Estates. "Free." Lena smiled, surprised by how true it was. "Like I can finally stop fighting and start just living." They'd been walking back to the car when Lena spotted a familiar figure approaching hesitantly. Victoria, looking thinner and somehow diminished, her usual confidence replaced by uncertain shoulders and downcast eyes. "Lena, can we talk? Please, just 5 minutes." Every instinct screamed at Lena to walk away, to deny Victoria even the satisfaction of acknowledgement. But something in her sister's expression, genuine remorse instead of performative apology, made her pause. 5 minutes, she agreed, gesturing to Dante that she'd meet him at the car. They moved to a quieter section of the courthouse steps, and Victoria twisted her hands nervously before speaking. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Sleeping with your fiancé, destroying your trust, saying those horrible things at the gala. I was jealous and petty, and I've spent the last 6 months realizing I destroyed the only family relationship that actually mattered for a man who never cared about either of us." "Is this the part where you expect me to absolve you?" Lena's voice was calm, clinical. Tell you it's okay, and we can rebuild our sisterly bond? No, I know it's not okay. I know we're probably never going to be close again, or even friendly. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry, not just because everything fell apart, but because I hurt you. You didn't deserve what I did, and Marcus definitely didn't deserve the loyalty you gave him. Victoria's voice cracked. You were always the better person. I spent our whole lives resenting you for it instead of trying to be better myself. The apology was more honest than Lena had expected, raw in ways that suggested actual self-reflection rather than strategic image management. She studied her sister's face, seeing genuine remorse and the kind of hard-won understanding that only came from consequences. I appreciate the apology, Lena said finally. I do. But Victoria, you're right. We're probably never going to be close again. What you did broke something that can't be fixed with apologies. I can forgive you eventually, for my own peace more than yours, but I can't trust you, and without trust there's no relationship worth having. I understand. Victoria nodded, tears spilling over. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you built, how you survived all of this. You're exactly who I always wanted to be, but was too insecure to try becoming. Then try now. Be that person for yourself instead of competing with me. Lena surprised herself by reaching out to squeeze her sister's hand briefly. I hope you figure out who you are when you're not defining yourself in opposition to me, genuinely. She walked away before the moment could become more complicated, joining Dante at the car with something like peace settling in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of eventually letting go of the anger that had consumed so much energy. How'd it go? Dante asked as they pulled into traffic. Better than expected. She actually apologized, and I think she meant it. Lena leaned back against the seat, letting exhaustion wash over her. I told her we'd probably never be close again, but I hope she figures herself out. That's remarkably gracious considering she slept with your fiancé and helped destroy your family relationships. I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it for me so I can stop carrying around anger that serves no purpose except making me bitter. She reached over to lace her fingers through his. I'm tired of being angry. I want to just be happy. Then let's work on that. Dante raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. Starting with dinner somewhere ridiculously expensive where we celebrate Marcus being in prison and your sister actually growing a conscience. They did exactly that. An obscenely expensive dinner at Per Se where they drank wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent and talked about everything except the past. About expansion plans for Whitmore Wine Collective, about a property Dante was developing in Brooklyn, about whether they should get a dog and what kind of ridiculous name they'd give it. Normal couple things, the kind of conversation Lena had never had with Marcus because their entire relationship had been performance. I love you, she said abruptly between courses, the words surprising her as much as they clearly surprised him. I didn't plan to say that tonight, or maybe ever, because I'm still figuring out how to be in a relationship without losing myself. But I do. Love you, the real you, not the performance or the empire or any of it. Just you. Dante was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face with that intense focus that still made her spine straighten. Then he smiled, genuine and warm and achingly vulnerable. I love you too. Have for weeks probably, but I didn't want to pressure you while you were still healing from Marcus's bullshit. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, Lena Whitmore, and I plan to spend considerable time proving I deserve you. You already do. She kissed him across the table, not caring who saw or what photos might emerge. You gave me space to become myself and resources to build my dreams, and you never once tried to make me smaller to accommodate your ego. That's worth everything. The next year unfolded with the kind of steady growth that felt sustainable rather than explosive. Whitmore Wine Collective expanded to a second location in Manhattan, this one featuring a full tasting room and private event space that quickly became the go-to venue for sophisticated corporate functions and wine education seminars. Lena hired 6 more employees, built relationships with vineyards across 4 continents, and was featured in Wine Spectator's 40 Under 40 list of industry innovators. Dante's real estate empire continued growing, but he made a point of keeping his criminal reputation at arm's length through strategic philanthropy and legitimate business practices. The whispers never fully disappeared. People would always assume his success came from shady dealings, but the actual evidence showed a businessman who played aggressively, but legally. They bought a brownstone together in Park Slope, arguing cheerfully about furniture choices and kitchen renovations, while building a life that belonged to both of them equally. No performance, no roles, just two ambitious people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment to build something real. Lena's mother eventually reached out with a stilted apology that acknowledged she'd prioritized appearances over her daughter's well-being. They settled into a careful relationship, monthly lunches where they talked about safe topics and avoided anything that might trigger old wounds. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, which felt more valuable than performative closeness. Maya stood as maid of honor when Lena and Dante got married in a small ceremony at their favorite vineyard in Napa, 18 months after that first devastating kiss at the gala. Jean-Luc officiated, giving a speech about how the best wines came from vines that struggled, that adversity created complexity, and depth that easy growth never could. To struggle in complexity, Dante toasted during the reception, raising his glass to Lena with eyes full of love and genuine partnership. And to the woman who turned catastrophe into empire and taught me that falling can be the beginning instead of the end. To new beginnings, Lena echoed, kissing her husband while their friends applauded and evening light painted the vineyard in shades of gold and amber. And to building something better from the ashes. She thought about that night at the gala sometimes, the shock of betrayal, the desperate impulse that made her kiss a stranger, the way her entire life had shattered in the space of 30 seconds. It had felt like the end of everything she'd built. Turned out it was just the destruction of a life that had never actually fit, making space for something real and extraordinary to grow. 5 years after the gala, Whitmore Wine Collective was valued at $12 million and operated 4 locations across the East Coast. Lena had been featured in Forbes, given keynote speeches at industry conferences, and built a reputation as someone who combined expertise with innovation and treated relationships as valuable as profit margins. She'd created exactly the kind of career she dreamed about during those long nights at Hampton Estates, but better, because it belonged entirely to her. Dante's empire had grown similarly, though he'd pivoted increasingly toward legitimate development and away from the gray areas that had built his initial reputation. They worked together sometimes, combining wine curation with upscale residential development in ways that benefited both businesses. But mostly they maintained separate professional lives that complemented rather than competed, coming together in evenings that mixed shop talk with genuine intimacy. "Do you ever regret it?" Dante asked one evening as they shared wine on the terrace of their brownstone, watching sunset paint Brooklyn in impossible colors. The scandal, the publicity, all of it? Lena considered the question seriously, thinking about everything that had led them here. "I regret Marcus's betrayal and the pain it caused. I regret that it took public humiliation to realize I was living someone else's life. But the kiss? Starting over? Building something real with you?" She turned to face him fully, this man who'd caught her when she fell and helped her build wings instead of another cage. "Not for a second. That was the first honest choice I'd made in years." "Good." He pulled her closer, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Because I'm not letting you go. You're stuck with me, Mrs. Morello." "Mrs. Whitmore Morello," she corrected, because she'd kept her name professionally even while taking his personally. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." They sat together as the city lights began twinkling to life, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of broken lives and built something extraordinary from the ashes. The scandal that had destroyed Lena's old life had given birth to everything she'd actually wanted: success on her own terms, love without performance, a partnership built on equality and genuine respect. Sometimes, Lena thought, the best thing that could happen was having everything fall apart. Because only in the wreckage did you discover what was actually worth rebuilding, and what had always been a beautiful prison disguised as a life. She'd kissed a stranger at a gala while her world burned around her. And somehow, impossibly, that single reckless choice had led her here, to love and success, and a life that finally fit the woman she'd always had the potential to become. to catastrophic beginnings, Lena murmured, raising her glass to the city that had witnessed her destruction and resurrection. Dante clinked his glass against hers, his smile warm and real. And to the empires we build from them. They drank to new beginnings and hard-won wisdom, to love that survived scandal and business partnerships that became something more. And somewhere in Manhattan, in the galleries and restaurants and charity galas where New York's elite gathered to perform their carefully curated lives, people still whispered about the night Lena Whitmore kissed Dante Morello and burned down everything she was supposed to be. But Lena didn't care about whispers anymore. She was too busy living the life she'd built from those ashes, spectacular and successful and entirely, unapologetically hers.